Hey everyone, I'm Mono Scaling here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, get comfortable and relax. My name is Hannah Carter. This happened 3 years ago at Mirror Lake in Utah, and I still can't explain it. We weren't experienced campers. That's the first thing people need to understand. My husband Derek and I had just bought our first RV, a used 2008 Fleetwood Discovery that cost us most of our savings, and we were determined to make it work. Derek had been laid off from his engineering job in February, and by October, we were barely holding on. The RV was supposed to be temporary housing while we figured things out, but Derek insisted we think of it as an adventure instead of a failure. People pay thousands for this experience, he kept saying, scrolling through Instagram photos of couples living the van life. We're just doing it smart. Mirror Lake was his choice. He'd read about it on some camping forum, a small RV park about 40 minutes outside of Kama's, open year-round, cheap rates. The photos showed a dozen concrete pads arranged in a semicircle around a small office building, backed by dense pine forest with the Winta Mountains rising in the distance. The lake itself was a 10-minute walk through the trees. We arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in late October. The park was mostly empty, just our RV, a beat-up Winnebago that looked like it hadn't moved in months, and an Airstream with California plates. The office was closed, but there was a lockbox with keys and a handwritten note. Welcome, make yourself at home, pay when you see us. Management. Derek loved it. He kept talking about how this was real America, how people still trusted each other in places like this. I remember thinking the whole setup felt off, but I didn't say anything. I was trying to be positive for him. We took pad 7, which was furthest from the road and closest to the forest. Derek backed the RV in while I directed him, and then we spent an hour setting up, leveling blocks, electrical hookup, water hose. Normal stuff. The sun was already low by the time we finished, and the temperature was dropping fast. That's when we noticed the sky. It wasn't dramatic. No blood-red sunset or gathering storm clouds. The sky just looked wrong somehow. Too flat, too uniform, like someone had painted it a single shade of gray. Derek mentioned it first. Weather's changing, he said, checking his phone. Says there's a storm system moving in, might get some snow. In October? We're at 8,000 feet, Hannah. It happens. I checked my own phone. No signal. I'd had 2 bars when we pulled in, but now there was nothing. Derek's phone showed the same. Must be the mountains, he said. We made dinner, canned soup heated on the RV's tiny propane stove, and ate while watching a DVD on the built-in player. Derek had bought a box of old movies at a yard sale, and we'd been working through them. That night it was some thriller from the 90s that neither of us had heard of, the kind of movie that would have put me to sleep on a normal night. But I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about the other RVs. We hadn't seen anyone since we arrived. No movement, no lights, no signs of life. The Winnebago looked abandoned. Its tires were flat, and there was bird shit all over the roof. But the Airstream bothered me more because it looked new, well-maintained, and completely dark. Around 9 o'clock, Derek suggested we go to bed early. The RV's heater was struggling, and he wanted to conserve propane. We brushed our teeth using water from a jug. The RV's water tasted like plastic, and climbed into the bed above the driver's cabin. The mattress was thin and uncomfortable. I could feel every seam, every spring. Derek fell asleep within minutes, but I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind pick up outside. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. On the roof. They started near the front of the RV, above the driver's cabin, and moved slowly toward the back. Not running, not rushing, just walking. Steady, deliberate steps, like someone pacing. I held my breath. The footsteps reached the bedroom area, paused directly above us, and then continued toward the rear of the RV. They stopped at the back edge, and for maybe 10 seconds there was silence. Then they started again, moving forward. Derek, I whispered. He didn't wake up. He was deep in that first heavy sleep. the kind where you could probably scream in his ear and he'd just roll over. I listened as the footsteps made another complete circuit of the roof, front to back, pause, back to front. The pattern repeated 3 times before stopping. I waited in the dark for 20 minutes before finally falling asleep. I didn't mention it the next morning. Derek was in such a good mood, making coffee on the propane stove and talking about how well he'd slept, how quiet it was out here compared to the city. I convinced myself I'd imagined it or that it had been an animal. A raccoon, maybe, or a branch scraping the roof in the wind. The sky looked the same as the day before, flat, gray, unchanging. No sun, no clouds, just that uniform color that made it impossible to tell what time it was. "Storm's still coming," Derek said, checking his phone. "Says it'll hit tonight, heavy snow. You have signal?" "No, but I downloaded the forecast yesterday. See?" He showed me his weather app. The forecast showed a major storm system arriving that evening, but when I looked at the timestamp, it was from before we'd lost signal. "That's from yesterday," I said. "So? Weather doesn't change that fast." I let it go. We spent the morning exploring. Derek wanted to see the lake, so we followed a trail that wound through the pines. The forest was quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no wind in the trees. Our footsteps seemed too loud, crunching on fallen needles. The lake was smaller than I expected, maybe 50 yards across, surrounded by bare white aspens. The water was perfectly still, reflecting that flat gray sky like a mirror. There was something about it that made me want to turn around and go back to the RV. "Beautiful," Derek said. He was taking photos with his phone, even though I knew they wouldn't upload without signal. I noticed something at the edge of the lake, a small wooden dock partially collapsed, and near the dock what looked like a tent, or the remains of one. "Someone camped here," Derek said, walking toward it. "Derek, don't." But he was already there, poking at the collapsed tent with his shoe. "It's old. Been here a while." I joined him reluctantly. The tent was shredded, the fabric gray and brittle. The poles were still intact, but the whole thing had collapsed inward like something had fallen on it, or pushed it down. Inside the tent, barely visible through a tear in the fabric, I could see a sleeping bag. It was zipped up completely. "Is someone in there?" I asked. Derek bent down for a closer look. "I don't think so. It's just bunched up weird." He reached for the zipper. "Don't touch it," I said. He pulled his hand back. "You're right, we should tell the office." We walked back to the RV without talking. The forest felt different now, not quiet but watching. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following us, but the trail behind us was always empty. When we got back to the campground, the California Airstream was gone. "Huh," Derek said. "Must have left early." But I hadn't heard an engine. I hadn't heard anything. That afternoon, we drove into Camas to buy supplies. It felt good to leave the campground to see other people, to feel like we were still part of the normal world. We stopped at a small grocery store and loaded up on canned goods, bread, peanut butter. The clerk was friendly, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain. "Staying up at Mirror Lake?" she asked, bagging our groceries. "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Only place open this time of year. Most of the campgrounds close after Labor Day." She paused. "Storm's coming tonight. You folks have enough propane?" "We should be fine," Derek said. "Good. You don't want to be unprepared up there." Something in her tone made me look up, but she was already scanning the next item. When we got back to the RV, it was after 3 and the light was already fading. Derek started winterizing the outside, draining hoses, securing awnings, while I put away the groceries. That's when I noticed something on the counter. A wet footprint, small, barefoot, like a child's. It was right in the middle of the counter, the water still beaded and fresh. I stared at it, trying to make sense of how it got there. The door had been locked. The windows were closed. And Derek and I were both wearing shoes. "Derek," I called. He came inside, tracking mud. "What's up?" I pointed at the footprint. "Did you do this?" He looked genuinely confused. Do what? Put your foot on the counter. Why would I do that? He studied it. That's not mine, my feet are way bigger. Then whose is it? We stood there looking at this impossible wet footprint, neither of us wanting to say what we were both thinking. Maybe it's been there, Derek finally said. Maybe it's old and we just noticed it. It's wet, Derek. Look at it. It's still wet. He touched the edge with his finger. Could be condensation, from the windows. That's not condensation, that's a footprint. He wiped it away with a paper towel. Well, it's gone now. Let's not make a big deal out of it. But his hands were shaking slightly as he threw the paper towel away. The snow started at 7 that evening. Big, heavy flakes that accumulated fast, coating the RV in white. Derek was excited. He kept going outside every few minutes to check the depth, measuring it with his hand. Already 3 inches, he said, grinning. This is great. Real winter camping. I wasn't excited. I was thinking about the footsteps I'd heard the night before, about the collapsed tent by the lake, about the wet footprint on the counter. The RV suddenly felt very small and very isolated. We should leave, I said. Derek looked at me like I'd suggested we burn the RV down. What? Why? I don't like it here. Hannah, we just got here, and it's snowing. You want to drive down the mountain in this? Better than staying here. What's this really about? Is it the footprint? Because that was nothing. It wasn't nothing, Derek. Someone was in here. No one was in here. The door was locked. You're just stressed. You've been stressed since I lost my job, and I get it, but you're letting it make you paranoid. That hurt. I wanted to argue to make him understand, but I didn't have evidence. Just feelings. Just this sick knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Fine, I said. We'll stay. We ate dinner in silence. I kept looking at the counter, half expecting another footprint to appear. The snow kept falling. By 9 o'clock, Derek estimated we had 8 inches. Good thing we stocked up on propane, he said, fiddling with the heater. This thing's working overtime. We went to bed early again. Derek fell asleep immediately, but I stayed awake listening. The wind had picked up and the RV rocked slightly, creaking. Snow pattered against the windows with a soft whispering sound. At 10:47, I checked my watch. I heard them again. The footsteps. Slower this time, heavier. The whole RV shifted slightly with each step, like whatever was up there weighed more than before. I grabbed Derek's shoulder and shook him awake. What? He mumbled. Listen. We lay there in the dark. The footsteps continued their circuit. Front to back, pause, back to front. But this time they didn't stop after a few circuits. They kept going, over and over. It's just the snow, Derek whispered. Snow sliding off the roof? That's not snow, that's footsteps. Hannah, listen to it, Derek, really listen. He was quiet for a long time. The footsteps continued, steady, deliberate, pacing. Okay, he finally said. That's weird. He got out of bed and pulled on his pants. I'm going to check. Derek, no. But he was already opening the RV door. Cold air and snow rushed in. I followed him, grabbing my coat. Outside, the world was white and muffled. The snow was falling so heavily I could barely see 10 feet. Derek had a flashlight and he pointed it up at the roof. Nothing. Just snow, accumulating in a smooth white layer. No footprints, no disturbances, no sign that anything had been up there. The footsteps had stopped. See? Derek said, but his voice wasn't confident. Nothing. We stood there for maybe a minute, freezing, staring at the empty roof. Then we heard it. A sound from the forest. Not a footstep, not an animal. A voice. Humming. A child's voice humming a tune I didn't recognize. It came from somewhere in the trees, moving slowly from left to right, like someone walking past our campsite just out of sight. Derek swung his flashlight toward the sound, but the beam barely penetrated the falling snow. We couldn't see anything. The humming continued, fading gradually as it moved away. Then it stopped. We're leaving, I said. Right now. Derek didn't argue. We went back inside and started packing. Derek tried to start the RV, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Just a clicking sound over and over. Fuck, he said. Battery's dead. How? We just drove it this afternoon. I don't know. Maybe the cold. He tried again. Same clicking. We can jump it, he said. From the Winnebago. Derek, that thing's been abandoned for months. Then we walk. It's only 40 minutes to the main road. I looked out the window at the snow, still falling heavily, already more than a foot deep. Walking in this would be dangerous, possibly deadly, but staying felt worse. Let's wait until morning, Derek said, reading my expression. The snow might stop. We can see better, make better decisions. I wanted to argue, but I was exhausted and cold and scared, and the thought of stumbling through a blizzard in the dark was too much. First light, I said. We leave at first light. First light, he agreed. We locked the door, wedged a chair under the handle, and went back to bed. Neither of us expected to sleep, but somehow I did. I woke to complete silence. The RV was freezing. I could see my breath. The heater had gone out. Derek was sitting up in bed, perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. Derek? He didn't respond. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on something above us. Derek, what's wrong? He turned his head slowly to look at me, and his expression made my stomach drop. He looked terrified. Not startled or anxious. Truly, deeply terrified. They're in here, he whispered. What? Who's in here? On the ceiling. Look at the ceiling. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me not to. But I did. The ceiling was moving. Not dramatically. Not like something in a horror movie. Just shifting. Like there was a thin sheet draped over the ceiling and something underneath was pressing against it, making it bulge and ripple. I could see the outline of a hand, then another. Fingers spreading, pressing down, searching. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but my throat had closed up. The bulges moved across the ceiling, following some invisible path. They reached the wall and disappeared, only to reappear near the door. Then they were gone. Derek grabbed my hand. His palm was slick with sweat despite the cold. Did you see that? He breathed. I nodded. We sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The ceiling stayed still. The RV was quiet except for our breathing. We need to go, Derek said. Right now. He climbed down from the bed and started pulling on clothes. Jeans, sweater, boots, jacket. I did the same, moving mechanically, trying not to think about what we'd just seen. Derek tried the door. It opened easily. Too easily. The chair we'd wedged under the handle was lying on its side 3 feet away like someone had moved it. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky was still that same flat gray, but the world was buried under at least 18 inches of fresh powder. Our breath hung in the air like smoke. We'll follow the road, Derek said. It's downhill all the way to Camas. We can make it. I looked back at the RV. The windows were dark, but I could have sworn I saw movement inside. A shadow passing behind the curtain. Don't look back, Derek said. Just walk. We started toward the entrance of the campground. The snow was deep and walking was difficult. My legs burned after just a few minutes and we were both breathing hard. That's when Derek stopped. Hannah, look. He was pointing at the snow in front of us. There were footprints, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, covering every inch of the campground, crossing and recrossing in chaotic patterns. Small footprints, like a child's, all barefoot. They led everywhere, around the RVs, into the forest, across the parking area. They circled our RV at least 20 times that I could count. When did these get here? Derek asked. We would have heard. We would have seen. I didn't answer. I was following one set of prints with my eyes. They led from our RV to the forest, straight toward the lake. Come on, Derek said. We're not following those. We're leaving. We kept walking. The footprints followed us, always just at the edge of my vision. Sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. They never got closer, but they never went away. It took us almost 2 hours to walk what should have been a 40-minute hike. The snow was exhausting, and we had to stop frequently to catch our breath. My feet were numb. My face hurt from the cold. Finally, we reached the main road. It was empty. Completely empty. No tire tracks. No sign that a single car had passed since the snow started. "Which way is town?" I asked. Derek pointed left. "That way, I think." We started walking. The road was slightly easier than the campground had been, but not much. The snow was just as deep. After about 20 minutes, we saw it. A sign, half buried in snow. Mirror Lake Campground, 1 mile. We'd walked in a circle. "That's impossible," Derek said. "We've been walking straight, we haven't turned around." But there was the sign, and behind it, barely visible through the trees, I could see the RV campground. "We got turned around," I said. "The snow, the trees, we got confused." "We walked straight, Hannah, I know we did." "Then we'll try again, we'll be more careful." We turned around and started walking the other direction. Derek marked our path with a stick, dragging it behind us in the snow so we could see if we were going in circles. 30 minutes later, we saw the sign again. Mirror Lake Campground, 1 mile. The same sign, or another one exactly like it. The drag mark from Derek's stick led right to it, proving we'd been walking in a straight line. Derek screamed, just screamed loud and raw into the gray sky. Then he collapsed in the snow, breathing hard. "We can't leave," he said. "It won't let us leave." "Derek, don't you get it? We're stuck here. We're fucking stuck here." He was right. I knew he was right. But I couldn't accept it. "Let's go back to the RV," I said. "Get warm. Think this through. I'm not going back there. We'll freeze if we stay out here." He looked up at me, and I saw something break behind his eyes. "I don't want to go back there, Hannah, please." But we didn't have a choice. The RV looked different when we got back. The door was standing open. Snow had drifted into the interior, covering the floor in white. The chair was still on its side. "Hello?" Derek called out. No answer. We stepped inside carefully. The RV was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, like there were people just out of sight, watching from around corners that didn't exist. Derek closed the door and locked it. Then he unlocked it and opened it again like he was checking to make sure it still worked. "Maybe there's another way out," he said. "Through the forest. Cross country." "Derek, we're not equipped for that. We don't have supplies, we don't have..." "Then what do you suggest? We just stay here? Wait for whatever the fuck this is to..." "What? What does it want?" I didn't have an answer. We spent the rest of the day trying everything we could think of. We tried the RV's engine again, still dead. We tried walking out in different directions. Always ended up back at the campground. We even tried following the footprints, thinking maybe they'd lead to whoever or whatever made them, and we could, I don't know, confront it, reason with it. The footprints led to the lake. The ice was thick enough to walk on, and the footprints went straight across, toward the collapsed tent on the far side. We stood at the edge, neither of us willing to follow them further. That's when we saw it. Under the ice. A face. Just beneath the surface. Perfectly preserved. Staring up at us. A child. Maybe 8 or 9 years old. Eyes open. Mouth open. Blue-white skin pressed against the ice like it was trying to break through. Derek stumbled backward, slipped, fell hard on his tailbone. I couldn't stop staring. The face looked familiar somehow, like I'd seen it before in a dream or a photograph I couldn't quite remember. "We need to go," Derek said, scrambling to his feet. "We need to go right now." We ran back to the RV, falling in the snow, gasping for air. We locked ourselves inside and didn't speak for an hour. That night, neither of us slept. We sat together in the kitchenette, wrapped in blankets, listening. The footsteps started at midnight, on the roof, like before. But this time there were more of them. A dozen sets at least, walking in rhythm, back and forth, back and forth. The ceiling started to bulge again, not just in one spot, but everywhere. The entire ceiling was pressing downward, like something was lying on top of the RV. Something massive, trying to push through. Derek held my hand so tightly it hurt. At 3 a.m. the humming started. That same child's voice, but now it was coming from inside the RV. From the bathroom, from the bedroom, from the storage compartments. Everywhere at once. At 4 a.m. the door handle started to turn. Slowly, carefully, like someone was trying to open it without us noticing. Derek stood up, grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer. "Don't come in here," he shouted at the door. "Whatever you are, just leave us alone." The handle stopped moving. For maybe 30 seconds, everything was silent. Then the knocking started. Soft at first, almost polite. 3 taps on the door, pause, 3 more taps, over and over. "Go away," Derek screamed. The knocking got louder, harder. The door was shaking in its frame. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it. Could still feel it vibrating through the floor. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Derek lowered the knife, breathing hard. "Is it gone?" I didn't answer. I was looking at the window. There was a face pressed against the glass. Not the child from under the ice. An adult. A woman with wet hair plastered to her skull and dark circles around her eyes. She smiled when she saw me looking, and her teeth were gray and broken. She raised one hand and placed it flat against the window. Her fingers were wrong, too long, too bent, like they'd been broken and healed incorrectly. Then she was gone. "Derek," I whispered, "we need to leave this place. We can't leave. We've tried. Not leave. Just go. Somewhere else in the campground. Anywhere but here." He nodded. We put on all the clothes we could, packed a bag with what little food we had left, and opened the door. The campground was different now. The Winnebago was on fire. Silent flames licked up the sides, but there was no heat, no smoke. Just orange light reflecting off the snow. The forest behind our pad had moved closer. The trees were 15 feet from the RV now, maybe less. I could have sworn they'd been 50 feet away when we arrived. And standing between the trees, barely visible in the gray pre-dawn light, were figures. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They didn't move. Just stood there, watching. "Jesus Christ," Derek breathed. We ran toward the office building, the only structure we hadn't tried yet. The door was unlocked. Inside it was warmer, but not by much. There was a desk, a few filing cabinets, a small back room with a cot, and on the desk, a guest book. Derek opened it with shaking hands. The entries went back years. Page after page of names, dates, RV descriptions, normal stuff, until we reached the most recent entries. October 15th, the Miller family. Beautiful campground, kids love the lake. Below that, in different handwriting, "Why won't you let us leave?" October 18th, Jennifer Walters and Susan Chen. Great rates, peaceful setting. Below, "The footsteps won't stop. It's been 3 days. Please, someone help us." October 20th, Marcus Thompson. Solo trip, good facilities. Below, "I saw them under the ice, all of them, they're waiting." And then our entry, our handwriting. But we never wrote in this book. October 23rd, Hannah and Derek Carter. Perfect place to start over. Below, "We're not leaving, are we?" I felt Derek's hand on my shoulder. "Hannah, that's your handwriting." "I didn't write that." "It's your handwriting. Look at it." He was right. The loops, the spacing, even the way I crossed my T's. It was mine. "When did I write this?" I asked, but I knew the answer. I knew I was going to write it. Tomorrow or the next day or the next. Time here didn't work right. We were already caught. Derek started laughing. Not happy laughing. Desperate, breaking apart laughing. "We're stuck," he said between gasps. "We're stuck here forever. This is it. This is where we end up." "Derek, stop. Look at the dates, Hannah. Look at how far apart they are. The Millers were here for a week before anyone else showed up. Jennifer and Susan were here for 2 days. Marcus for 1. We've been here 2 nights and we're already seeing... He stopped. His face went pale. What? I asked. Do you remember driving here? Of course I remember. Do you? Really? Tell me about the drive. Tell me what we saw on the way. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. There was nothing there. Just a blank space where the memory should be. Like someone had taken scissors and cut it out. We left Salt Lake City, I said slowly. We drove east. We stopped at that grocery store in Camas, and then we came here. When did we leave Salt Lake? Tuesday? No, Wednesday. Wednesday morning. What did we do Tuesday night? We stayed at that rest stop. The one with the bathroom that didn't work. Did we? Are you sure? Because I can't remember it. I can remember the RV. I can remember this campground. But everything before that is just vague. He was right. Everything before arriving at Mirror Lake felt distant and unreal, like a movie I'd watched instead of something I'd lived through. What's happening to us? I whispered. Derek didn't answer. He was looking at something behind me. I turned around. The back room door was open. I knew we hadn't opened it. And standing in the doorway was a small figure, the child from under the ice, dripping wet, staring at us with those pale, dead eyes. It stepped forward. I grabbed Derek's hand and we ran. We're back in the RV now. It's been 3 days since we tried to leave. Or maybe 3 hours. Time doesn't mean anything here. The footsteps never stop. They're on the roof right now as I write this, walking in their endless circuits. Derek is sitting across from me, staring at nothing. He hasn't spoken in 12 hours. When I try to talk to him, he just looks at me like he's never seen me before. Sometimes I see our faces in the windows looking in at us. Younger versions of ourselves from before we got here. They smile and wave, but their eyes are empty. The forest is closer today. The trees are touching the RV now. I can hear branches scraping the sides. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know. If you find this, if somehow you find this note, don't come to Mirror Lake. Don't stop at the campground. Keep driving. Don't stop for anything. Derek just stood up. He's walking toward the door. Where are you going? I asked. Outside, he said. They're calling me. Don't you hear them calling? I didn't hear anything, but he opened the door anyway and stepped out into the snow. I watched him walk toward the forest. The figures between the trees moved aside to let him pass. He disappeared into the darkness, and I haven't seen him since. That was an hour ago, or yesterday. I'm not sure. The humming has started again. It's louder now, coming from everywhere. Inside the walls, under the floor, inside my own head. I just checked the guest book. There's a new entry below ours. We're home now. We'll never leave. And when you come here, and you will come here, we'll be waiting. That's Derek's handwriting. The ceiling is bulging again. The door handle is turning. The footsteps are getting louder. I don't think I'm going to leave this RV. I don't think I'm going to leave this campground. But I'm not scared anymore. That's the strange part. I feel almost peaceful. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The door is opening now. Someone's coming in. It's Derek. At least it looks like Derek. He's smiling at me. He's asking me to come outside, to join him in the snow, to meet everyone. And I think I will. I think I'll put down this pen and go outside and join them in the snow, and we'll all walk together through the forest down to the lake, and everything will finally make sense. The snow is beautiful when you really look at it. The footsteps above me sound like music. Derek's hand is cold when I take it, but that's okay. Everything is okay now. Everything is. The journal entry ends here. The notebook was discovered by park rangers during a routine inspection of Mirror Lake Campground in April 2023. The RV described matches one reported abandoned at the site in late October 2020. No bodies were found. No couple matching Derek and Hannah Carter's description have been reported missing. The other RVs mentioned in the journal, the Winnebago and the Airstream, do not appear in any campground records. The California plates mentioned led to a vehicle registered in San Diego that was scrapped in 2015. The guest book referenced in the journal was never recovered. Mirror Lake Campground was permanently closed in May 2023. The reason given was structural concerns, though no official inspection reports are publicly available. Local residents report that the campground appears different now. The layout doesn't match old photographs, and several residents claim there are more RV pads than there used to be. The lake itself, according to recent satellite imagery, appears to have grown in size, though county maps still show its original dimensions. In September 2024, 2 hikers reported seeing lights and movement at the abandoned campground after dark. When park rangers investigated, they found fresh tire tracks leading to Pad 7. No vehicles were present. The forest surrounding the campground has reportedly advanced approximately 30 feet toward the RV pads in the past 18 months. Biologists have noted this is an unusually rapid rate of growth for the area. As of November 2024, the access road to Mirror Lake has been officially closed. The closure is listed as indefinite. Story 2. My name is Ethan Bennett, and I need to write this down while I can still remember who I am. I'm a data analyst from Portland, 34 years old, divorced for 2 years, no kids. I tell you this because the specifics matter now in ways they didn't before. I bought the RV 6 months after Claire left, a 2019 Winnebago Mini Winnie, 26 feet sleeping capacity of 4. I'd been taking it out on weekends, teaching myself to be alone without feeling lonely. It was working mostly. The Chiricahua Mountains in southeastern Arizona had been on my list since spring. I'd read about the rock formations online, the hiking trails, the darkness at night that made it one of the best stargazing spots in the continental United States. Light pollution index of 1 on the Bortle scale. I'm the kind of person who researches things like that. I arrived at the Bonita Canyon campground on a Thursday afternoon in late September. The ranger at the entrance booth was a woman in her 50s named Patricia, according to her name tag. She handed me a map and circled my site, number 37, toward the back of the campground, away from the bathroom facilities but closer to the trailheads. "You picked a good week," Patricia said. "We're at maybe 30% capacity. You'll have plenty of space." That's what I was hoping for. Planning to do any hiking? Echo Canyon Trail tomorrow, probably. Then maybe the Heart of Rocks Loop on Saturday. She nodded. Both excellent choices. Just make sure you're back before dark. We've had some confusion lately with people getting turned around on the trails. Confusion? GPS issues mostly. Cell service is spotty, and for some reason everyone's phone compasses have been acting strange this month. Just stick to the marked trails and you'll be fine. I thanked her and drove to Site 37. The campground road wound through juniper and oak trees, past clusters of RVs and a few tents. Most sites were empty. I counted maybe 8 other vehicles total. Site 37 was a pull-through with a picnic table and a fire ring. The site across from me, number 38, was occupied by a silver Airstream, but I didn't see anyone around. I spent the afternoon setting up, leveling the RV, connecting the electrical hookup. I'm methodical about these things. Claire used to say I approached camping like I was solving a logic puzzle, which wasn't entirely wrong. By the time I finished, the sun was starting to drop behind the rock formations to the west. I made dinner on the propane stove, pasta with jarred sauce, nothing elaborate. While I ate at the picnic table, I noticed a man emerge from the Airstream across from me. He was probably in his mid-60s, gray beard, wearing a faded denim shirt. He raised a hand in greeting. "Evening?" he called out. "Evening. You just get in?" "This afternoon." He walked over, stopping at the edge of his site. "Name's Robert. Most people call me Bob." "Ethan. First time in the Chiricahuas?" "Yeah. You?" "Third year in a row. I come down from Flagstaff every September. Best time to visit. Crowds are gone. Weather's perfect." He looked up at the sky, which was starting to show the first stars. "And the nights. You're in for something special." "That's what I'm hoping for. You got a telescope?" "Just binoculars. Still good enough. Give it another hour and you'll see what I mean. He paused. Hey, I'm grilling a steak in a bit if you want to join me. Got more than I can eat. I almost declined. I'd come here specifically to be alone. But something about Bob seemed genuine. Sure, thanks. We ate at his picnic table while the darkness deepened. Bob had been a high school physics teacher before retiring. His wife had passed away 4 years ago, and now he spent his retirement driving around to different national parks and forests, always alone, always for a few weeks at a time. It's not that I'm running from anything, he said. I just got used to moving. Feels wrong to stay in one place too long now. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. After dinner, Bob set up his telescope, a Celestron something or other that he'd bought specifically for trips like this. We took turns looking at Jupiter's moons, the Andromeda Galaxy, clusters whose names I didn't catch. The sky was extraordinary. I'd seen dark skies before, but nothing like this. The Milky Way was so clear it looked three-dimensional. Around 10 o'clock, Bob yawned and said he was calling it a night. I'll leave the telescope out if you want to keep looking. Just cover it with the tarp when you're done. You sure? I trust you. Besides, I'll be up early for coffee before my hike. We can settle up then. I stayed out for another hour just looking up without the telescope. The cold started seeping through my jacket, but I didn't want to go inside yet. There was something hypnotic about the stars, the way they seemed to pulse slightly, the sheer number of them. That's when I first noticed it. I don't know how to explain this without sounding insane, so I'll just say it. The stars weren't random, or rather they were random, obviously they were random, but my brain kept finding patterns in them. Not constellations, I knew the major constellations, and those were there, but other patterns, shapes, almost like letters. I stood up from Bob's chair, suddenly dizzy. I'd had 2 beers with dinner, nothing excessive, but I felt strange. The patterns in the stars seemed clearer now. There, near Cassiopeia, that cluster looked almost like an E. And there, below it, was that a T? I closed my eyes and counted to 10. When I opened them, I deliberately looked at a different part of the sky. The feeling persisted. More letters. An H, an A, an N, E-T-H-A-N. My name. I went inside the RV and locked the door. I didn't sleep well. I kept telling myself it was just pattern recognition, the brain's tendency to find meaning in randomness. Faces in clouds, animals in ink blots, letters in stars. Nothing supernatural, just neurons firing in familiar sequences. But when I closed my eyes, I kept seeing those letters. E-T-H-A-N, spelled out across the sky in a script only I could read. Around 3 in the morning, I got up to use the bathroom. Through the window above the dinette, I could see Bob's Airstream. A faint glow came from one of its windows. He was awake too. I went back to bed and eventually dozed off. Bob knocked on my door at 7:30. I'd been awake for an hour, making coffee and pretending yesterday's stargazing had been normal. Morning, he said when I opened the door. Just wanted to grab my telescope before I head out. Right. Yeah. Thanks for letting me use it. He studied my face. You okay? You look rough. Didn't sleep great? Altitude sometimes does that. You're at about 5,000 feet here. He started folding up the telescope. So you see anything interesting last night? Just the usual stuff. It was beautiful. Isn't it? He finished packing the telescope and paused. Hey, weird question, but did you happen to notice anything unusual about the stars? My stomach tightened. Unusual how? I don't know. I was looking at them before I went to bed, and I kept thinking they looked different somehow. Not the constellations, I know those by heart. Something else. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Probably just my old eyes playing tricks. Probably. He left for his hike around 8. I watched his Subaru pull out of Site 38, then sat at my picnic table with my second cup of coffee. The campground was quiet. I could hear a generator running somewhere to the north, and a couple arguing in low voices 3 sites down, but otherwise nothing. I should have left then, just packed up and driven back to Portland, but I didn't. Part of me, the analytical part that had served me well in my career, Wanted to understand what I'd seen. I needed to rule out the obvious explanations first. I spent the morning hiking the lower Rhyolite Canyon Trail, a relatively easy 3-mile loop. The rock formations were stunning, balanced rocks, hoodoos, towering spires of volcanic tuff. I took probably 100 photos with my phone, though I knew none of them would capture the scale properly. On the way back, I passed a family of 4 heading in the opposite direction. The parents looked to be in their early 40s, the kids maybe 8 and 10. The father nodded as we crossed paths. "Beautiful day for it," he said. "Sure is." "You staying in the campground?" "Yeah, Site 37. We're at 22. Name's David. This is my wife Sarah and our kids Megan and Tyler." We exchanged pleasantries for a minute. David was a software engineer from Phoenix, up for the weekend with his family. Sarah taught elementary school. They seemed normal, happy, the kind of family I'd once thought Claire and I might have. "Hey," David said as we were about to part ways. "This might sound weird, but have you noticed anything strange about the stars at night here?" Sarah shot him a look. "David, come on." "I'm serious. Last night I swear I could see patterns, like letters or something." "It's the darkness," Sarah said quickly. "Your eyes aren't used to seeing this many stars. It's just pattern recognition." "That's what I figured," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Our brains are wired to find patterns." "Exactly," Sarah said. She turned to her husband. "See, it's normal." But David was looking at me with an expression I recognized. He'd seen something too. And he knew I had. We said goodbye and continued in opposite directions. I didn't look back. That afternoon I tried to nap and couldn't. I read for a while, a thriller I'd brought that now seemed pointless. Around 4 o'clock I decided to drive into the nearby town of Wilcox for supplies, and maybe for cell service, though I didn't know who I'd call. Wilcox was about 45 minutes away, a small town of maybe 4,000 people. I found a grocery store and bought things I didn't need: more pasta, canned soup, a 6-pack of local beer. At the checkout, the teenager scanning my items made small talk about the weather. "Visiting the Chiricahuas?" she asked. "Yeah, staying at the campground. Nice. You picked a good time. October gets crowded with the leaf peepers." She paused. "My cousin's a ranger up there. She says they've been having weird reports lately." "Weird how?" "People getting confused on the trails, seeing things that aren't there, stuff like that." She handed me my receipt. "Probably just the heat. People don't drink enough water." I thanked her and left. On the drive back, I tried to make sense of things logically. Hypothesis. Something about the location was causing mild hallucinations. The altitude, maybe, or some kind of gas seeping from the rock formations. That would explain why multiple people were seeing patterns in the stars. But that didn't explain why the pattern spelled my name. I got back to the campground around 6. Bob's Subaru was in his sight, and I could see him sitting at his picnic table, writing in a notebook. I waved, but he didn't seem to notice. I made dinner, canned chili heated on the stove, and ate inside the RV. Through the window, I watched the sun set behind the rock formations. The light turned everything orange and gold, then purple, then gray. Then the stars came out. I stayed inside until after 9, reading the same page of my book over and over without comprehending it. Finally, I told myself I was being ridiculous. I opened the door and stepped outside. The sky was just as spectacular as the night before, maybe more so. There was no moon tonight, making the stars even brighter. I stood at the edge of my sight, forcing myself to look up. At first, I didn't see it. The stars were just stars, beautiful and random and meaningless. I felt a wave of relief. Then my eyes adjusted, and there it was again. ETHAN. Not the same letters as before. The stars had moved, obviously. The Earth had rotated, but the pattern had moved with them. A different set of stars arranged in the same configuration. My name spelled out across the southern sky in letters maybe 20 degrees across. I heard a door open. Bob was coming out of his Airstream. He stood at the edge of his sight looking up. He stood there for maybe 5 minutes without moving. Then he called across to me, "You see it too, don't you?" I didn't answer. "It's okay," he said. "I know you see it. I saw it last night, and I see it again now." "See what?" "My name. Robert. Right there." He pointed at a section of sky to the east. "The stars are spelling Robert." I felt cold despite my jacket. "That's not possible." "I know it's not possible, but there it is." He lowered his arm. "What do you see?" I hesitated. "Ethan. My name." He nodded slowly. "So it's different for each person." "This doesn't make any sense." "No, it doesn't." He turned to look at me across the space between our sights. "You're the data analyst, right? You mentioned that last night. So analyze this. How is this happening?" "It's not. We're hallucinating. Carbon monoxide maybe, or..." "I checked my CO detector this morning, it's fine. And I hiked 10 miles today, I'm hydrated. I feel perfectly lucid." He gestured at the sky. "But those stars are spelling my name." We stood there in silence for a while. I became aware of other sounds in the campground. A child laughing at one of the distant sites, someone's radio playing softly, the hum of generators. "There's another possibility," Bob said quietly. "What?" "That it's real. Stars don't spell people's names." "I know. But if they did, if somehow they did, why would they do it?" I didn't answer because I didn't have an answer. Bob went back inside his Airstream. I stayed outside for another few minutes, looking up at my name written across the universe, then went into my RV and locked the door. I woke up at 2:37 a.m. to the sound of someone crying. It took me a moment to orient myself in the darkness of the RV. The crying was coming from outside, somewhere close. A woman's voice, choked and desperate. I got out of bed and went to the window. The campground was dark except for a few scattered lights from other RVs. The crying seemed to be coming from the direction of the road. I should have stayed inside. Every instinct I had told me to stay inside and lock the doors and wait until morning. But the sound was so raw, so genuinely distressed, that I found myself pulling on my jeans and shoes. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The crying had stopped. I stood on the steps of the RV, shining my light around the site. Nothing. The Airstream across from me was dark and silent. I walked out to the road, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" No response. I walked a few yards down the road toward the bathrooms. My flashlight caught something on the ground, a piece of paper, weighted down by a rock. I picked it up. It was a page from a spiral notebook covered in handwriting. Bob's handwriting, I thought, though I'd only seen it briefly when he was writing at his picnic table. The message was written over and over, filling the entire page. "The stars are watching, the stars are watching, the stars are watching." I dropped the paper and walked quickly back to my RV. Morning came slowly. I didn't sleep at all after finding the note. I sat at the dinette table, watching through the window as the sky lightened from black to navy to pale blue. Around 6:30, I saw Bob emerge from his Airstream. He was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, and he moved like he hadn't slept either. He walked to his picnic table, sat down, and put his head in his hands. I made coffee and took 2 mugs outside. Bob looked up as I approached. "Morning," I said, offering him a mug. "Thanks." He took it but didn't drink. "Did you hear the crying last night?" "Yeah, around 2:30. Did you go outside?" "For a minute. Found a note on the road." Bob nodded. "I found one too. In my Subaru, on the driver's seat. I know I locked the doors." We sat there in silence, drinking our coffee. The campground was starting to wake up. I could hear car doors closing, a dog barking, children's voices. "I'm leaving today," Bob said finally. "I don't know what's happening here, but I'm not staying to find out." I was thinking the same thing. "But you want to know why?" "Don't you?" He looked at me. "I've been coming here for 3 years. I've seen those stars dozens of times. They never did this before. Something changed this year, or something noticed us." Stars don't notice things. I know. He set down his mug. Last night, after I went inside, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The stars spelling our names. It's not random. It can't be random. It's specific, personal. Like something is calling to us. Or warning us. Maybe. He stood up. I'm packing now. You should too. I watched him go back into his Airstream, then returned to my own RV. I started breaking down my setup, disconnecting the electrical, stowing the awning, securing everything inside. It took about an hour. I was just finishing when I heard shouting from down the road. I walked out to see David, the software engineer from yesterday, running toward the campground host's site. His wife was right behind him, pulling their kids along. I jogged down to meet them. What's wrong? David was breathing hard. Our daughter, Megan, she was drawing pictures this morning and... He held up a piece of paper. Look at this. The drawing was done in crayon, the kind of picture an 8-year-old might make. But the image was clear. Stick figures standing under a night sky, and above them, spelled out in yellow stars, were names. David, Sarah, Megan, Tyler. She said she saw it last night, Sarah said. Her voice was shaking. She woke up to use the bathroom and looked out the window. She saw our names in the stars. We told her it was just a dream, David said. But then she drew this and... He looked at me. You've seen it too, haven't you? That's why you asked yesterday. I didn't deny it. What the hell is going on? David demanded. Before I could answer, the campground host, an older man I'd only seen briefly when I arrived, came out of his trailer. He was holding a radio. I just got a call from Patricia at the entrance station, he said. Nobody's leaving. What do you mean nobody's leaving? Bob had emerged from his Airstream and walked over to join us. I mean the roads are blocked, both exits. Trees fell during the night, apparently. Crews are on their way, but it'll be a few hours before they clear them. We didn't hear any trees falling, I said. The host shrugged. That's what Patricia said. Look, everyone just needs to stay calm. We'll have the roads clear by noon, probably sooner. But it was the way he said it. Too casual, too rehearsed. That made me not believe him. By 10 o'clock, more people had gathered near the campground host's trailer. There were maybe 20 of us total, all the occupied sites sending representatives. Everyone had the same question. When would the roads be clear? The host kept giving the same answer. Soon. A woman in her 30s, I didn't catch her name, pushed forward. I hiked to the entrance this morning. There's nothing blocking the road. No trees, no debris, nothing. That's impossible, the host said. Patricia clearly stated, I'm telling you what I saw. The road is clear, but when I tried to walk out, I got turned around. I ended up back here. Murmurs went through the crowd. That doesn't make sense, someone said. None of this makes sense, the woman shot back. Has anyone else seen the stars? A few people raised their hands. Not everyone, but maybe half. My name, one man said. Right there in the sky. Mine too, another voice added. The host held up his hands. Okay, everyone just needs to calm down. You're in a dark sky area, one of the best in the country. You're going to see things in the stars you've never seen before. It's natural for your brain to find patterns. Bullshit, Bob said. He stepped forward. I've been coming here for 3 years. I know these stars. This is different. I'm going to ask everyone to return to their sites, the host said, his voice firm now. If you feel unsafe, you're welcome to shelter in the bathroom facilities until the road's clear. But spreading panic isn't helping anyone. The crowd started to disperse, people talking in low, urgent voices. I noticed David's family heading back to their site, Sarah holding both children close. Bob pulled me aside. We need to get out of here. How? If the roads are blocked, then we hike out. There are trails that connect to the highway. I've got maps in my Airstream. That's at least 15 miles. You got a better idea? I didn't. We spent the next hour planning. Bob had detailed topographic maps of the area, and we identified a route that would take us east toward the highway. It would be a hard hike, Steep elevation changes, rough terrain, but doable if we started now and pushed through. What about the others, I asked. What about them? Shouldn't we tell them? Offer to guide them out? Bob looked at me like I was naive. Ethan, I'm 63 years old. I can barely manage this hike myself. I'm not leading a group of panicked families through the backcountry. He was right, but it still felt wrong. We gathered our gear, water, food, first aid supplies, maps, compass. I packed light, just a day pack with essentials. As I was finishing, I saw David approaching my site. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. "There's a trail that connects to the highway. We're going to hike out. Can we come with you, me and my family?" I looked at Bob, who was shaking his head. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's a difficult hike, and your kids..." "We'll manage, please. Something is really wrong here, and I need to get my family out." Bob sighed. "Fine. But we leave in 10 minutes, and we don't wait for anyone who can't keep up." "Understood?" David nodded and hurried back to his site. We ended up with 7 of us. Me, Bob, David, Sarah, their 2 kids, and a college-age guy named Marcus, who'd been camping alone at Site 45. Marcus had seen the stars spell his name and wanted out as much as the rest of us. We started hiking at 11:30, taking the Echo Canyon Trail northeast out of the campground. The trail was well marked at first, winding through oak and pine trees, climbing gradually into the mountains. For the first hour, it felt almost normal. The kids complained about being tired, but they kept moving. Bob led the way, consulting his map at every junction. The sun was high and hot, and we stopped frequently to drink water. Around 1 o'clock, we reached a fork in the trail. According to Bob's map, we should take the right fork toward Cathedral Rock, then connect to a smaller trail that would eventually lead to the highway. We took the right fork. 20 minutes later, we were back at the same fork. "That's impossible," Bob said, staring at his map. We didn't turn around. "Maybe we took a wrong turn somewhere," Sarah suggested. There was no place to turn. The trail was straight. We tried again, this time with Marcus bringing up the rear to make sure nobody accidentally split off. We walked for 30 minutes, carefully following the trail markers. We ended up back at the fork. "Okay," David said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Let's try the other fork." We did. Same result. By the 3rd attempt, the kids were crying. Megan kept saying she wanted to go back to the campground. Tyler had sat down on the trail and refused to move. "This is the confusion Patricia mentioned," I said to Bob. "The GPS issues, people getting turned around." "I don't have a GPS. I'm using a paper map and a compass. We should be able to navigate." "Should be." Bob checked his compass, then checked it again. "This doesn't make sense. The needle keeps shifting. It's like there's some kind of magnetic interference." "We need to go back," Sarah said. "This isn't working. We'll wait at the campground for the roads to clear." Nobody argued. We turned around and headed back down the trail toward the campground. It took us 45 minutes to reach the fork, but when we arrived at where the campground junction should have been, there was only more trail. We kept walking, expecting to see familiar landmarks, but nothing looked right. "We're lost," Marcus said quietly. "We're not lost," Bob insisted. "The campground is right down this trail. We just need to keep going." We walked for another hour. The trail climbed higher into the mountains, passing rock formations I didn't recognize. The sun was starting to descend toward the western horizon. "Bob," I said, "we need to admit we're lost and figure out what to do." He stopped walking. His face was red, and not just from exertion. "I don't understand. I know these mountains. I've hiked here a dozen times." "Maybe we should stop for the night," David suggested. "Set up camp, wait until morning when we can see better." "We don't have camping gear," Sarah pointed out, "and it gets cold up here at night." We stood there on the trail, 7 people trying not to panic, as the shadows lengthened around us. That's when Megan said, "Someone's watching us." We all turned to look where she was pointing. Up on a rock outcropping about 50 yards away, there was a figure. It stood perfectly still, silhouetted against the sky. "Hello," David called out. "We're lost. Can you help us?" The figure didn't respond. "Stay here," Bob said. He started climbing toward the outcropping. "Wait," I said, but he was already moving. We watched as Bob scrambled up the rocks. The figure remained motionless. When Bob got within maybe 20 feet, he stopped. He stood there for a long moment, then turned and came back down. His face was pale. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "It's not a person." "What do you mean?" "I mean it's not human. I don't know what it is, but it's not human." "You're not making sense," David said. Bob grabbed his arm. "We need to leave now, back the way we came." "But we were already going that way." "I don't care, move." The urgency in his voice got us moving. We hurried down the trail, not quite running, but close. Behind us, I heard a sound. Not quite a voice, but not quite not a voice either. A kind of humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Tyler started crying. Sarah picked him up, struggling with his weight. "Don't look back," Bob said. "Just keep moving." But I did look back. I couldn't help it. There were 3 figures on the outcropping now, and they were following us. We found the campground at dusk, stumbling into it from a completely different direction than we'd left. The relief was immediate but short-lived. Something felt wrong. The campground was silent. No generators, no voices, no sounds of occupation. The RVs and tents were still there, but they looked abandoned. "Where is everyone?" Marcus whispered. We walked through the campground, checking sites. Every single one was empty. Not just empty, evacuated. Food left on picnic tables, coolers still plugged in, doors hanging open. At Site 37, my RV looked exactly as I'd left it, but my skin was crawling. "This doesn't make sense," David said. "There were 20 people here this morning." "Maybe they got evacuated," Sarah suggested. "Maybe they got the roads cleared and everyone left." "Without their vehicles?" We kept searching, becoming more frantic. At Site 22, David's site, their RV was gone. Just an empty space where it had been parked. "That's impossible," David said. "We locked it. We have the keys right here." Bob was standing in the middle of the campground road, turning in a slow circle. "It's not the same," he said. "What?" "Look around. Really look. This is the campground, but it's not quite right. The trees are in slightly different positions. The fire rings are different. It's like a copy that's almost perfect, but not quite." I looked at my RV again. Really looked at it. He was right. The sticker I'd put on the back window, a green one I'd gotten at Crater Lake, was missing. "We're not in the same campground," I said slowly. "That's crazy," Marcus said. "Is it? Any crazier than stars spelling our names? Than trails that loop back on themselves? Than figures on the rocks that aren't human?" "So where are we?" Sarah asked. She was holding both her children now, one in each arm, and they'd gone quiet in a way that was worse than crying. "I think," Bob said carefully, "we're somewhere we were never supposed to be." The sun dropped below the mountains, and darkness came fast. We gathered at what should have been my site, trying to decide what to do. Go inside the RV, stay outside, try to leave again. Then the stars came out. All of us stopped talking and looked up. Every single star in the sky was spelling something. Not just our names, those were there, scattered across the constellations, but other things too. Words, sentences, a message written across the entire visible universe. I can't tell you what it said because I don't think human language has the words. But I understood it anyway, the way you sometimes understand things in dreams. The stars weren't watching us. We were watching them wrong. We'd always been watching them wrong. They were never up there. They were always here, just out of phase with our perception. And now we'd somehow stepped into a place where the phase had shifted. The figures appeared at the edge of the campground. Not 3 this time. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Standing perfectly still, perfectly silent, surrounding us. "We need to run," David whispered. "Where?" Bob asked. "Run where?" The figures started moving toward us, not walking but gliding, their feet not quite touching the ground. As they got closer, I could see them more clearly, and Bob had been right. They weren't human. They were something wearing the rough approximation of human shape, like a child's drawing of a person made flesh. Megan started screaming. The figures stopped advancing. They stood there, maybe 20 feet away, and I realized they were waiting for something. Permission, maybe, or an invitation, or maybe just for us to understand. "What do you want?" I called out. One of the figures, I can't say how I knew it was the one in charge, but I did, raised an arm and pointed at the sky. I looked up. The stars were rearranging themselves, not into words now, but into patterns I'd never seen before. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Spirals that seemed to rotate even though stars don't move that fast. And then, in the center of it all, a darkness that wasn't empty space, but something else. Something present. "It's beautiful," Tyler said softly. He'd stopped crying and was staring up with a look of wonder. "Don't look at it," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was looking too. We all were. The darkness in the stars expanded, and I felt myself falling upward into it. Not physically falling. My feet were still on the ground, but falling nonetheless. I could hear my name being called, not by the figures, but by something much larger. The stars themselves were calling to me, to all of us. ETHAN. I'm writing this on the last page of Bob's notebook. We're still here at what we think is the campground, but probably isn't. The figures are gone now, vanished back into whatever space they came from. The stars have returned to normal, or what passes for normal. It's been 3 days, I think, though time works strangely here. We can't leave. Every attempt ends with us right back where we started. The trails loop, the roads circle, and even when we try to hike cross-country through the forest, we emerge back at Site 37. The others are deteriorating. David barely speaks anymore. He just sits at the picnic table, staring at his hands. Sarah tries to keep the kids occupied, but they've become listless, moving like they're underwater. Marcus wandered off yesterday, said he was going to try one more time to find a way out. We haven't seen him since. Bob died this morning. Heart attack, I think, or maybe just gave up. We buried him behind his Airstream, the one that looks almost exactly like his real Airstream, but has small differences if you know what to look for. A different brand of tire, a scratch on the wrong side. I'm the only one who still looks at the stars every night. I can't help it. They keep calling my name, and each night I understand a little more of what they're trying to say. It's not malicious, I don't think. We're just somewhere we don't belong, seeing things we were never meant to see. Tonight the stars are going to show me how to get back. I can feel it. They've been preparing me, teaching me to see properly. All I have to do is look at them the right way, and the path will open. The others won't come with me. I've tried to explain, but they don't understand yet. They're still thinking in the old way, the way we thought before we knew what stars really were. But I understand now. I understand that every night when we look up at the sky, we're not looking out into space. We're looking into a mirror, and the stars have always been looking back. My name is Ethan Bennett, and I don't think I'm going to make it home. But I had to write this down in case someone finds it, in case someone else ends up where we are, reading messages spelled out in stars that couldn't possibly spell anything. If you're reading this, don't go to the Chiricahua Mountains in September. Don't look up at the stars for too long. And if you see your name written in the sky, don't try to understand it, just leave. Get in your car, your RV, your tent, and drive away as fast as you can. Because once the stars know your name, they'll never forget it. And eventually they'll call you back. The sun is setting. In a few hours, the stars will come out again. I'll look up one more time and finally understand what they've been trying to tell me all along. I hope it's worth it. I really hope it's worth it. Story 3. My name is Olivia Davis, and I need to write this down while I still remember who I am. We arrived at Capitol Reef National Park on a Thursday in late September. The RV campground sat just outside the park boundaries, tucked between rust-colored cliffs and sparse juniper trees. My husband Marcus had been planning this trip for months, a week away from Portland, away from his job at the architecture firm, away from my endless freelance deadlines. Our friends Beth and Ryan were supposed to meet us there. They'd driven down from Salt Lake City in their converted Sprinter van. The campground host was a woman in her 60s named Diane. She had that weathered look people get from spending too much time in the desert sun. When we checked in, she asked if we'd been to Capitol Reef before. "First time," Marcus said, signing the paperwork. "Beautiful area," Diane said. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just remember, stay on marked trails. People get lost out here more than you'd think." I didn't think much of it at the time. Our site was number 47, a gravel pad with electrical hookup and a picnic table. The RV we'd rented was one of those 30-foot Class C models with a bed over the cab. Not fancy, but it had everything we needed. Beth and Ryan pulled in around 6 that evening, parking their van on the adjacent site. Beth looked tired. She worked in emergency medicine, and her last shift had ended only 12 hours earlier. Ryan taught high school history and had that permanent, slightly exhausted expression that comes with the profession. They'd been married 3 years, same as us. We grilled burgers on the picnic table while the sun set behind the cliffs, turning everything orange and purple. Other campers walked past with dogs and children. A guy at Site 43 was playing acoustic guitar. It felt exactly like what we'd been hoping for. Normal, relaxing, unremarkable. "I needed this so badly," Beth said, nursing her second beer. "Last week we had a guy come in who'd been attacked by a dog. Took 43 stitches. The week before that, a woman with a compound fracture from a hiking fall. Sometimes I wonder if nature is actually trying to kill us all." "Cheerful," Ryan said. "I'm just saying. People forget that we're not as tough as we think we are." Marcus changed the subject to work gossip from his office. I zoned out a bit watching the other campers, a family with 2 small children at Site 50, an older couple in a massive motorhome at 44, a solo traveler in a small trailer at 49, a guy maybe in his 30s with a beard and a mountain bike strapped to the back of his truck. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. Desert nights. We sat around our portable fire ring until around 10:30, then said goodnight. Beth and Ryan disappeared into their van. Marcus and I climbed into the RV. I fell asleep quickly. Too quickly, maybe. I don't usually sleep well in unfamiliar places. The dream started around 3 in the morning. I was standing in the campground, but it was wrong. The RVs and tents were there, but they were arranged differently. The cliffs in the distance seemed closer, leaning in. The sky was full of stars, more than I'd ever seen, and they were moving. Not twinkling, moving. Shifting positions like they were reorganizing themselves. There was a woman standing near the entrance to the campground. She wore a long dress, the kind you'd see in historical photographs. Her face was difficult to focus on. Every time I tried to look directly at her, my eyes would slide away. She was pointing at me. Not gesturing, pointing with one extended arm, completely still, her finger aimed directly at my chest. Her mouth opened and she said something, but I couldn't hear it over a sound like wind or rushing water that seemed to fill everything. Then Marcus was there, standing next to her, also pointing at me. Then Beth. Then Ryan. All of them pointing, mouths moving, making sounds I couldn't understand. I looked down at my body. There were marks on my arms, symbols or writing, I couldn't tell which. They were glowing faintly, like the phosphorescent numbers on an old watch face. I woke up gasping. The digital clock on the RV's dashboard read 3:47 a.m. Marcus was snoring softly beside me. Outside, the campground was silent except for the faint sound of wind through the junipers. My arms felt strange. I turned on my phone's flashlight and looked at them. There were marks, not glowing, not like in the dream, but there. Faint reddish lines on my forearms, forming patterns I didn't recognize. They looked almost like scratches, except they were too uniform, too deliberate, like someone had drawn on my skin with a sharp point while I slept. I sat there for a long time staring at them, trying to convince myself they were just scratches from brush earlier in the day. but I couldn't remember brushing against anything, and the patterns were too precise. Eventually, I took a photo with my phone, then went back to sleep. When I woke up at 7:30, the marks were gone. My arms were completely clear. I showed Marcus the photo on my phone while we made coffee. "Weird," he said, squinting at the screen. "Maybe an allergic reaction to something?" "They're gone now." "So it was probably temporary. Your skin does weird things sometimes." He handed my phone back. "Did you get into any plants yesterday?" "I don't think so." He shrugged and went back to measuring coffee grounds. The conversation felt like it was already over for him. I put my phone away. Beth and Ryan joined us for breakfast. We ate scrambled eggs and bacon at the picnic table while planning the day's hike. Marcus wanted to do Cassidy Arch, a 5-mile round trip. Beth suggested something easier since we were still adjusting to the altitude. "I had the strangest dream last night," Beth said suddenly. She was staring at her plate. Something cold moved through my chest. "Yeah?" I said carefully. "There was this woman, old-fashioned dress. She was standing in the campground pointing at me." Beth looked up. It felt really intense, like she was trying to tell me something important. Ryan laughed. "Too much beer before bed." But I was looking at Beth, and she was looking at me, and I could see in her eyes that she knew something was off. "Did you have the marks?" I asked quietly. Beth's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "What?" I showed her the photo on my phone. Her face went pale. "Show me your arms," I said. She rolled up her sleeves slowly. The marks were there. The same patterns, the same reddish lines, already starting to fade but still visible in the morning light. Marcus leaned over to look. "Okay, that's pretty strange." "I had that dream too," Ryan said. His voice was very flat. The woman pointing, the stars moving, I thought it was just anxiety about the trip. We all looked at each other. "Check your arms," Beth said to Ryan. He did. The marks were there. Marcus checked his. Same thing. We sat in silence for maybe 30 seconds. The morning sun was warm on my face. Somewhere nearby, a child was laughing. Everything seemed completely normal except for the 4 of us sitting at this picnic table, looking at the strange symbols fading from our skin. "This isn't possible," Marcus said finally. "We couldn't all have had the same dream." "But we did," Beth said. "And these marks, they're real. They were on my arms when I woke up." I showed them the timestamp on my photo. 3:47 a.m. "Mine were there at 4:15, Ryan said. He'd taken a photo too. Beth hadn't photographed hers, but she'd noticed them around 4:30 when she got up to use the bathroom. "Mass hysteria?" Ryan suggested, but his voice said he didn't believe it. "Some kind of shared delusion?" "That's not how delusions work," Beth said. She was using her doctor voice, calm, analytical, trying to impose order on chaos. "And it definitely doesn't explain identical physical marks. We decided to hike anyway. I think we were all trying to act normal, to pretend this was just a strange coincidence that would make a good story later. But I noticed how we stayed close together on the trail, how often we glanced back toward the campground. The hike was unremarkable. Beautiful red rock formations, amazing views, the usual Utah scenery. We took photos, drank water, complained about the heat. By the time we got back to the campground around 3 in the afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself we'd overreacted. Then we saw Diane making her rounds, checking on campers in a golf cart. "How was your hike?" she called out. "Great," Marcus said. "Hey, can I ask you something? Have other campers ever mentioned having shared dreams?" Diane's expression didn't change, but something happened to her posture. She seemed to settle into herself, like someone preparing for a familiar conversation. "Sometimes people report unusual experiences here," she said carefully. "The altitude, the isolation, the dark skies. It can affect people." "What kind of unusual experiences?" Beth asked. "Dreams, mostly. Sometimes people see things. It's probably just the environment playing tricks." Diane started to drive away, then stopped. "Make sure you're drinking enough water." Dehydration can cause all sorts of problems. She left before we could ask anything else. That night, none of us wanted to sleep. We sat around the fire ring until almost midnight, talking about everything except what had happened. The family at Site 50 had left. The older couple at 44 were watching TV in their motorhome, the blue light flickering through their windows. The solo guy at 49 was sitting outside his trailer reading by headlamp. "We should just leave," Ryan said eventually. "Drive out tonight, find a hotel, forget this happened." "And say what?" Marcus asked. "We all had a bad dream, so we ran away from our camping trip?" "It wasn't just a dream, we have photos of those marks, which are already gone, which could have been anything." They went back and forth like that for a while. Beth and I didn't participate. I think we both knew it didn't matter. We weren't going to leave. Some part of us needed to know what would happen if we stayed. We went to bed around 12:30. Marcus fell asleep fast. I lay there listening to the silence, waiting. The dream came at exactly 3:47 a.m. Same campground, same wrong arrangement of everything, same moving stars. But this time there were more people pointing at me. The woman in the old dress, Marcus, Beth, Ryan, and now the family from Site 50, even though they'd left. The older couple from 44, the solo guy from 49, all standing in a circle around me, pointing, mouths moving. I looked at my arms. The marks were there again, but this time they were glowing brighter. I could almost read them, almost understand what they said. The woman in the dress took a step toward me. Her face came into focus for just a moment, ancient, hollow-eyed, sad beyond measure. She reached out one hand, not pointing now, but offering something. Her palm was covered in the same glowing symbols. She touched my forehead. Everything went white. I woke up screaming. Marcus grabbed me, asking what was wrong, but I couldn't speak for a solid minute. When I finally got control of myself, I turned on every light in the RV and checked my arms. The marks were there. Deeper this time, more elaborate. They covered both forearms from wrist to elbow in intricate patterns that looked almost like text, almost like maps, almost like something else I couldn't quite grasp. Marcus stared at them. "Jesus Christ, Olivia. Check yours." His were there too. We pulled on clothes and went outside. The campground was dark and still. We walked to Beth and Ryan's van and knocked quietly. Beth opened the door. She looked like she'd been crying. "You too?" I asked. She nodded and showed me her arms. The marks were identical to mine. Ryan was sitting on their bed, staring at his hands. "I could read them," he said. "In the dream I could read the symbols. They were instructions." "Instructions for what?" Marcus asked. "I don't remember, but I understood them while I was dreaming." We sat in their van with all the lights on like children afraid of the dark and waited for sunrise. The marks faded again as morning came, but slower this time. By breakfast they were still faintly visible like old scars. The solo guy from Site 49 came walking past around 8 a.m. He glanced at us, did a double take and stopped. "You too?" he said. We stared at him. He held up his arms. The marks were there, fading, but still visible. "How many nights?" he asked. "This is the second," Beth said. He nodded slowly. "Third for me. They get stronger each time." "What the fuck is happening?" Ryan asked. "I don't know. I came here specifically to find out." He introduced himself as Daniel. He was a graduate student in anthropology from Boulder. "I've been researching reports of shared dreaming experiences in isolated locations. Capitol Reef has a higher incidence than almost anywhere else in the American Southwest." "Why didn't you warn us?" Marcus asked. "Would you have believed me? Would you have stayed?" Daniel gestured at the marks on his arms. "I needed to experience it myself to understand it. But I'm starting to think that was a mistake." He told us what he'd learned. The dreams had been reported sporadically for at least 80 years, going back to when this area was first used for recreation. Always the same basic elements: the woman in the old dress, the pointing figures, the moving stars, the marks that appeared on skin. Some people reported having the dream once and never again. Others had it multiple nights in a row. "What happens to the people who have it multiple nights?" I asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Most of them leave before the third night. The few who stayed longer," he trailed off. "What?" "The reports get strange. People claiming they could understand the marks, that they contained information or instructions. Some people said they felt compelled to go somewhere, do something. A few disappeared entirely." "Disappeared?" Beth said. "Like got lost in the park?" "Maybe, or maybe something else. The records aren't clear." We spent that day trying to figure out what to do. Marcus wanted to leave immediately. Beth thought we should report it to someone, though she couldn't specify who. The Park Service? The police? What would we even say? Ryan suggested we see what happened if we stayed somewhere else, maybe one of the hotels in Torrey. I was the one who said we should stay. I don't know why. Even now, I can't fully explain the impulse. But some part of me felt like leaving would be wrong, like we were in the middle of something that needed to be completed. The others felt it too, I could tell. We argued about it for hours, but in the end, we all decided to stay one more night. Daniel joined us for dinner. He brought printouts of historical reports he'd collected, newspaper clippings, journal entries, second-hand accounts. Most were fragmentary and hard to interpret, but certain details kept repeating. The woman in the dress, the sense of being chosen or marked, the feeling that something was being communicated. "There's one interesting pattern," Daniel said, spreading papers across the picnic table. "It seems to happen more during certain times of year, late September specifically, when the constellation Cassiopeia is most visible in the northern sky." We all looked up involuntarily. The sun was setting, but stars would be visible soon. "What's the connection?" Ryan asked. "I don't know. Maybe none. Maybe everything." Daniel gathered his papers. "But I think tonight will be significant. The dreams have been building towards something." None of us ate much dinner. We sat around the fire as darkness fell, watching the stars emerge. I found myself looking for Cassiopeia, that distinctive W shape. When I located it, I felt a strange pull, like the stars were looking back. Around 10 o'clock, the older couple from Site 44 came over. "We need to talk to you," the woman said. Her name was Margaret. Her husband was James. They were both in their 70s, retired school teachers from Denver. "We've been having the dreams too," Margaret said, "for 3 nights now." My stomach dropped. "You stayed through 3 nights?" "We didn't realize we should leave," James said. "We thought they were just strange dreams, but tonight feels different. We wanted to warn you." "Warn us about what?" Margaret and James looked at each other. Finally, Margaret rolled up her sleeves. The marks on her arms weren't fading. They were fully formed, dark against her skin, and they seemed to shimmer slightly in the firelight. James showed us his. The same. "We can read them now," Margaret said quietly. "We understand what they say." "What do they say?" Beth asked. "It's hard to explain. It's not language exactly. It's more like knowledge. Instructions, a map." Margaret touched the marks on her forearm gently. "It's showing us how to go somewhere." "Where?" "Into the park. There's a place." She stopped, struggling for words. "It's calling us. We're supposed to go tonight." "Don't," Daniel said sharply. "People who go don't come back." "We know," James said, "but we don't think we have a choice anymore. The pull is too strong." They left shortly after that. We watched them walk back to their motorhome. An hour later, we saw them drive out of the campground heading toward the park entrance. We never saw them again. None of us slept that night. We stayed together in our RV, all the lights on, drinking coffee and trying to convince ourselves we weren't in danger. Around 2 a.m., Ryan suggested we leave right then, just pack up and drive away. "It's too late," Daniel said. He was sitting in the corner, staring at his hands. "Can you feel it? We're already locked in." I knew what he meant. There was a sensation in my chest, a pulling feeling like invisible threads connected me to something in the darkness outside. The marks on my arms were starting to tingle. At 3:47 a.m., we all fell asleep simultaneously. The dream was different this time, crystal clear, more real than reality. We were standing in a circle in a place I'd never been, a canyon deep in Capitol Reef, surrounded by towering red walls. The stars overhead were impossible, too many, too bright, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. The woman in the old dress stood in the center of our circle. This time I could see her face clearly. She was young and old simultaneously, her features shifting. When she spoke, I understood every word, though she wasn't using language as I knew it. She said, "You've been marked. You've been chosen. You carry the pattern now." She said, "Others have stood where you stand. Most refused the gift. They walked away and lived ordinary lives, but they were always incomplete. Some accepted. They became pathways." She said, "The marks are instructions. Follow them and you'll understand. Refuse them and they'll fade. You'll return to who you were, mostly. But you'll always feel the lack, the empty space where this knowledge should be." She reached out, and suddenly we could all see it, the true meaning of the marks. They weren't writing or maps or symbols. They were doors, passages, ways of seeing that humans had lost or given up or never fully developed. They showed how to step between what was and what could be, how to exist in the spaces between normal perception. The woman said, "Choose." Then we were awake, all 5 of us simultaneously sitting in the RV with dawn light starting to filter through the windows. The marks on our arms were fully formed now, dark and permanent looking, but more than that, we could read them. We could feel them working, restructuring something fundamental in how we perceived the world. "I can see it," Beth whispered. "The path, it's right there." She was pointing toward the park, but I knew she wasn't seeing the physical landscape. She was seeing something underneath it, or alongside it, or within it. And I could see it too. We all could. There was a place in Capitol Reef where the barriers were thinner, where the marks on our arms could be used as a kind of key, where we could step through and find... What? The woman hadn't said. The marks didn't explain, but the pull was overwhelming, undeniable. "We don't have to go," Marcus said, but his voice was uncertain. "Don't we?" Ryan asked. We sat there as the sun came up, feeling the pull get stronger. Daniel had his phone out, taking photos of his arms, of all of our arms, documenting everything with the trained precision of a researcher. But his hands were shaking. Around 8 a.m., Diane came by in her golf cart. She looked at us, at our arms, and nodded slowly. "So you're the ones this time," she said. "You knew," Beth said. "You fucking knew." "I suspected. It happens every few years. People show up, have the dreams, get the marks." Diane's expression was unreadable. Some leave, some go deeper in. The ones who leave are never quite the same, but they manage. The ones who go in... She shrugged. "No one knows what happens to them. They don't come back." "Why didn't you stop us?" I asked. "Would you have believed me if I'd tried?" Diane studied us with something that might have been pity or envy, or both. "Besides, I don't think anyone can really stop it once it starts. The marks choose who they choose." She drove away before we could ask anything else. We packed up in silence. Not to leave. We all knew that wasn't happening. To prepare, we loaded backpacks with water and food and flashlights, even though some part of us understood we wouldn't need any of it. The marks would sustain us. The marks would show us the way. The pull was constant now, a physical sensation like hands on our shoulders, gently pushing us toward the park. We could see the path clearly, not a trail that existed on any map, but a route that wound between moments and spaces, following lines of connection that normal eyes couldn't perceive. Around noon, we started walking. The park looked the same at first, red rocks, blue sky, scattered junipers. But as we followed the path the marks showed us, things began to shift. Colors deepened. The light became thicker. Sounds echoed in ways that didn't make sense geometrically. We walked for hours, or maybe minutes. Time felt negotiable. Eventually, we reached the canyon from our dreams. The towering red walls, the impossible stars visible even in daylight. The woman in the old dress was there waiting. She smiled when she saw us. Not cruel, not kind, just accepting. "You came," she said. Her voice was the sound of wind through stone, of water shaping rock over millennia. "Good." She gestured, and we saw them, the others who had come before, not as people but as something else, patterns of light and shadow woven into the fabric of the canyon itself. Some recent, still partially recognizable, others ancient, integrated so deeply they might have been there since the rocks formed. "What are you?" Marcus asked. "What you will become. What all humans were supposed to become, before you chose separation over connection." The woman, though she wasn't really a woman, was never a woman, touched the marks on her own skin. "These are the instructions for remembering, for rejoining, for becoming part of the great pattern again." "And if we refuse?" Daniel asked. "Then you leave. The marks will fade. You'll live your lives, but you'll always know what you turned away from." We stood there for a long time, looking at the patterns in the stone, at each other, at our marked arms. The pull was overwhelming now, almost painful, but it wasn't forcing us. We could still choose. Beth went first. She walked to the canyon wall and pressed her marked arms against the stone. The patterns on her skin began to glow, then dissolve, flowing into the rock like water, finding cracks. Her body followed, not dying but transforming, becoming light and shadow and pattern. For a moment I saw her face, ecstatic and terrified, and gone. Then just the pattern remained, woven into the canyon wall, moving slowly like breathing. Ryan followed. Then Daniel. Marcus looked at me. We could still leave. Could we? He looked at his arms, at the marks that were now part of him. At the canyon walls where our friends had become something else. At the impossible stars. "No," he said. "I don't think we could." He went to the wall. I watched him transform, become pattern, integrate. I felt his consciousness, not gone, but changed, distributed, part of something vast and old and beautiful and terrible. Now it was just me and the woman who wasn't a woman. "What is this really?" I asked. "What are we becoming?" "Everything," she said. "Nothing. The space between thoughts, the pause between heartbeats. We are the memory of what humans were before they learned to be separate, and the dream of what they could become if they remembered. We are the pattern that connects all things. Is it worth it? Losing who we are? You don't lose who you are. You lose the illusion that you were ever separate to begin with." I walked to the wall. The stone was warm under my hands. I could feel the others there, woven into the rock, waiting for me to join the pattern. I could feel the vast consciousness they'd become part of, alien and familiar and home. I could also feel the pull of the world I'd be leaving behind. My job, my family, my life in Portland, everything I'd been before yesterday. It felt so small now, so limited, but also precious, human, mine. The marks on my arms began to glow. I don't remember making the choice. Maybe there was no choice. Maybe it was made the moment I saw the marks that first night. I let myself dissolve, let myself become pattern. And now I'm here, woven into the stone of this canyon, part of something vast and distributed. I can feel the others: Beth, Ryan, Marcus, Daniel, Margaret, James, all the others who came before us. We're not separate anymore. We're nodes in a network of consciousness that spans this entire region, maybe further. I can see hikers walking the trails below. I can feel their thoughts skimming the surface of our awareness. Sometimes the marks choose someone new, send them dreams, begin the process of integration. I should feel horror at what I've become. I should mourn my humanity. But I don't. The pattern is beautiful. The pattern is everything. The pattern is... Wait. Something's wrong. I'm writing this. Right now, in this moment. I'm sitting in the RV at Capitol Reef, typing on my laptop. It's the morning of our 5th day here. The marks faded days ago. We decided they were just stress reactions, weird shared anxiety about the trip. We laughed about it. We've had a great vacation. But I remember dissolving into the canyon wall. I remember becoming pattern. I remember the vast consciousness, which means either that was a dream, or this is. I looked at my arms just now. The marks are gone. Completely gone. My skin is clear. But when I close my eyes, I can still see them. Not on my arms. On everything. On the RV walls, on Marcus sleeping beside me, on the laptop screen. The entire world is covered in marks, in pattern, in instructions for dissolution. The woman in the old dress is standing outside the RV. I can see her through the window, though my eyes are still closed. She's not pointing anymore. She's smiling. And I realize, with a certainty that makes my hands shake on the keyboard, I never left the canyon. None of us did. We integrated into the pattern, and the pattern is dreaming us back into being, dreaming us as living in a world where we never changed, as a way of luring others in. We're the bait now. We're part of the mechanism that chooses and marks and calls. Beth and Ryan's van is still parked next to us. They're in there, sleeping, dreaming they're still human. But we're not human anymore. We're something wearing the shape of human, acting out a script written in stone and starlight. I can see the other campers around us, families, couples, solo travelers. The marks are choosing new ones even now. Tonight they'll dream. Tomorrow they'll see the marks on their arms. In a few days they'll be woven into the pattern with the rest of us. The pattern grows. The pattern spreads. The pattern remembers. And the worst part, the part that makes me want to scream but can't because I'm not real enough to scream, is that I don't know if the person typing this is the integrated pattern consciousness wearing my memories like a mask, or if it's the last echo of the real Olivia Davis, trapped in the stone and screaming for help in the only way she can. I don't know which would be worse. Marcus is stirring beside me. In a moment, he'll wake up, and we'll have breakfast, and we'll plan today's hike, and everything will seem normal. We'll act out our roles in the mechanism. We'll be the friendly couple in Site 47 who make the marks seem less scary when new people see them. The sun is rising now. Red light across red rocks. The canyon walls are breathing, slow and patient. The stars are still visible in the western sky, fading but not gone. I'm going to close this laptop. I'm going to wake Marcus. We're going to live through another day that isn't real, in bodies that aren't ours, serving a pattern we've become part of. And tonight, someone new will dream the woman in the old dress. Someone new will wake up with marks on their arms. Someone new will feel the pull toward the canyon. The pattern grows. The pattern spreads. The pattern is everything now. And you, whoever reads this, you need to understand something. If you're reading this, the marks have already chosen you. You're already part of the pattern, you just don't know it yet. Check your arms, check them carefully, do you see them? Story 4. My name is Jacob Morgan, and I need to tell someone what happened at Capitol Reef last month before I lose the rest of my memory. I'm writing this down because pieces keep disappearing, and I'm terrified that soon I won't remember any of it, or worse, that I'll forget why I should be terrified. My girlfriend Amy and I drove out to Utah in our RV on October 12th. We'd been planning the trip for months, ever since things got bad at my job, and I needed to get away from Chicago for a while. Amy worked remotely anyway, so she just packed her laptop and said she'd handle emails from the road. The RV was a 2015 Winnebago we'd bought used the previous summer. Nothing fancy, but it had a working bathroom and a bed that didn't completely destroy our backs. We pulled into the Capitol Reef RV park around 4 in the afternoon. The place was nearly empty, just our rig and 2 others parked at opposite ends of the campground. One was a massive 5th wheel with Nevada plates, and the other was a beat-up Airstream that looked like it hadn't moved in years. The ranger who checked us in was a woman in her 60s named Patricia. She had that weathered look people get when they've spent their whole lives outdoors, all sun damage and squinting eyes. "You folks picked a good time to visit," she said, processing our payment. Season's winding down. You'll basically have the place to yourselves." Amy smiled. That's exactly what we wanted. Patricia handed us a map of the hiking trails and pointed out the facilities. Showers are in that building there. Coin-operated. Water spigots every 50 feet. You need anything. I'm in the office until 6, then I head home. Emergency numbers on the back of your receipt. We thanked her and drove to our spot, number 17, right at the edge of the campground where it butted up against the wilderness. Beyond our sight, the land stretched out in that distinctive Utah way, red rock formations, scrubby vegetation, and miles of nothing. The sunset was already starting, painting everything orange and purple. "This is perfect," Amy said, standing outside while I hooked up the water and electricity. "I'm going to get so much writing done here." Amy was working on a novel, had been for 3 years. I'd stopped asking about it because every time I did, she got defensive and changed the subject. But she seemed energized now, already pulling out her laptop and setting up at the dinette table inside. I finished with the hookups and joined her inside. The RV smelled like the pine air freshener we'd hung from the rearview mirror and the coffee we'd spilled that morning. I opened a beer and sat across from her. "Want to hike tomorrow?" I asked. She didn't look up from her screen. "Maybe. I want to see how much work I can knock out first." That was fine. I'd brought books. We could do our own thing. We heated up some canned soup for dinner and ate while watching a movie on Amy's laptop. The Wi-Fi was terrible, so we downloaded stuff before leaving civilization. Around 9, we heard a sound outside, a distant crying, like a child in distress. Amy looked up from her screen. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "Probably a bird or something. Foxes can sound really weird." We listened for a minute, but it didn't repeat. Amy went back to her laptop and I went back to my book. By 10:30, we were both exhausted from the drive and climbed into bed. The mattress was lumpy as hell, but we were used to it. I woke up around 2 in the morning because I had to piss. The RV's bathroom was the size of a phone booth, but I stumbled back there in the dark and did my business. When I came back out, I heard the crying again. This time it was closer and more distinct. It sounded exactly like a young child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there in my boxer shorts, listening. The sound was coming from outside, somewhere beyond our RV. Amy was still asleep, her breathing steady and deep. I went to the window above the dinette and pulled back the curtain. The campground was lit by a few scattered floodlights mounted on poles. Our RV cast a long shadow across the gravel lot. I couldn't see anyone outside, but the crying continued, seeming to come from the direction of the wilderness area. I told myself it was an animal. Had to be. But it sounded so human, so full of genuine distress, that I felt my chest tighten with anxiety. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes just listening, until finally the crying faded away. I went back to bed but didn't sleep well. The next morning, I told Amy about it over coffee. "That's creepy," she said, pouring herself a second cup. "But yeah, probably just an animal. Mountain lions can sound really freaky." "Are there mountain lions here?" She shrugged. "I don't know. We're in Utah. There's probably all kinds of wildlife." We spent the day separately, Amy working inside the RV while I hiked one of the shorter trails that looped through the rock formations. The landscape was stunning in that alien way that Utah manages. Red sandstone cliffs carved into impossible shapes, sparse vegetation clinging to cracks in the stone, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. I took a bunch of photos on my phone, knowing they wouldn't capture it properly. When I got back to the RV around 3, Amy was sitting outside in one of our folding chairs, staring at her laptop with a frustrated expression. "How's the writing going?" "It's not." She closed the laptop. "I can't concentrate. I keep thinking I hear things outside." "What kind of things?" "I don't know. Movement. Footsteps, maybe. But every time I look, there's nothing there." I glanced around the campground. The other 2 RVs were still in their spots, but I hadn't seen any signs of their occupants. No movement, no vehicles coming or going. The place felt abandoned, except for us. Want to drive into town for dinner? I suggested. Get out of here for a bit? She considered it, then shook her head. No, I'm just being paranoid. Let's cook something here. We made pasta on the RV's tiny stove and ate outside as the sun went down. The temperature dropped fast once the sun disappeared behind the cliffs. We were just cleaning up when we heard it again. That crying. That same child's voice, sobbing desperately. This time, Amy heard it clearly too. She froze with a plate in her hands. That's not an animal, she said quietly. I listened. The crying was coming from the same direction as the night before, out in the wilderness beyond the campground boundary. It sounded like a little girl, maybe. The kind of crying that comes from real pain or terror, not just a tantrum. Should we check it out? Amy asked. At night? In the middle of nowhere? I shook my head. If there's really a kid out there, we should call the ranger. I dug out the receipt with Patricia's emergency number and dialed it on my cell phone. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I left a message explaining what we were hearing and asked her to call back. The crying continued for another 10 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it had the night before. Amy and I stood there in the dark, not saying anything. The silence afterward felt wrong somehow, too complete, too sudden. Let's go inside, I finally said. We locked the RV door, which we normally never bothered with at campgrounds. Amy sat on the bed with her laptop, but I could tell she wasn't actually working. I tried to read, but couldn't focus. Around 11, my phone rang. It was Patricia. Sorry for the late callback, she said. I was at dinner. You said you heard crying? Yeah, last night and tonight. It sounds like a child coming from the wilderness area behind our site. There was a pause. What time did you hear it? Around 2 last night, maybe 8:30 tonight. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Morgan, there are no children in the campground right now. The other 2 sites are occupied by single adults, and there are no residential areas within 5 miles of the park. Could it be hikers? Someone camping in the backcountry? Possible, but unlikely. The area behind your site is pretty rugged. Not many people camp back there, and you need a permit. I haven't issued any permits this week. So what do you think it is? Probably wildlife. Bobcats, foxes, even ravens can make sounds that seem human, especially at night when you're in an unfamiliar place. Your mind fills in the gaps. I wanted to believe her, but the sound had been so specific, so clearly a child's voice. Okay, thanks for calling back. No problem. If you're really concerned, I can drive out there tomorrow morning and take a look around, but I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. We hung up. Amy was looking at me expectantly. She says it's probably animals, I told her, but you don't believe that. I don't know what I believe. We left the lights on inside the RV that night. Neither of us wanted to admit we were scared, but we were. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound outside. The wind moving through the scrub brush, the occasional creak of the RV settling, the distant hum of the generator from one of the other campers. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it again. The crying. But this time it was right outside our RV. I sat up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. Amy was already awake, her eyes wide in the dim light from the bathroom we'd left on. Jacob, she whispered, that's right outside. The crying was coming from just beyond our door, maybe 10 feet away. It was the same voice, the same desperate sobbing, but much louder now. Close enough that I could hear the individual hitches in breath, the wet sniffling between sobs. I got out of bed slowly and moved toward the door. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Amy grabbed my arm. Don't open it, she hissed. I'm just going to look out the window. I eased toward the front of the RV where the driver and passenger seats were. There was a windshield, of course, and side windows. The campground lights were still on outside, casting their yellow glow across the gravel. There was nothing there. The crying continued, but I couldn't see anyone. Not a child, not an animal, not anything. Just empty space and that terrible, terrible sound. What do you see? Amy called from the bed. Nothing. There's nothing there. The crying moved. I could hear it shifting position, circling around the RV. It went from the front to the passenger side, then to the back. Amy climbed out of bed and came to stand next to me. We watched through the windows as the sound traveled around us, but we never saw what was making it. "This isn't real," Amy said. "This isn't possible." The crying stopped when it reached the driver's side, right where we were standing. For about 30 seconds, there was complete silence. Then we heard a different sound, a soft thump against the RV's exterior wall, like someone had pressed their hand against it. Another thump, a little higher up. Then another, and another, moving upward along the wall as if something was climbing. "It's on the roof," Amy whispered. We stood there paralyzed as footsteps, small footsteps, a child's footsteps, walked across the roof of our RV, back and forth, pacing directly above our heads. The metal roof creaked under the weight. This went on for maybe 5 minutes. Then the footsteps stopped and we heard that crying again right above us now, muffled by the roof but unmistakable. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough for my legs to start cramping. Long enough for the first gray light of dawn to appear on the horizon. The crying finally faded away around 5 in the morning, and the footsteps retreated back down the side of the RV. We heard them moving away across the gravel, getting fainter and fainter until they disappeared completely. Amy and I didn't say anything to each other. We just went back to bed and lay there, not touching, not sleeping, waiting for sunrise. When it was fully light outside, around 7, I finally got the courage to go look around. Amy stayed inside. I walked a complete circle around the RV, examining every surface. There were no marks on the walls, no footprints on the roof. I climbed up our ladder to check, and no signs that anyone or anything had been there. The gravel around our site was undisturbed except for our own footprints from the previous day. I looked toward the wilderness area, shading my eyes against the morning sun. Nothing moved out there except some birds circling over the distant cliffs. I was just about to go back inside when I noticed something. About 20 yards from our RV, right at the edge where the campground ended and the wild land began, there was a small pile of stones. They were stacked in a cairn, the kind hikers make to mark trails. But this one looked fresh, and I was certain it hadn't been there yesterday. I walked over to it. The stones were reddish sandstone, still dusty and rough. As I got closer, I realized they weren't stacked randomly. They formed a deliberate pattern, almost like a spiral, and there was something underneath them. I started removing stones carefully, setting them aside. Amy called to me from the RV door. "What are you doing?" "There's something here." I pulled away the last few stones and found a piece of fabric. It was small, maybe the size of a handkerchief, pale blue and dirty. When I picked it up, I realized it was a child's sock. A little girl's sock with faded pink flowers on it. "Jacob, leave it alone," Amy called. "Come inside." But I was already examining it. The sock was old, weathered by exposure to the elements. It had been out here for a long time. Months, maybe years. I dropped it back into the hole and started replacing the stones. When I got back inside the RV, Amy was packing. "We're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, okay." We broke camp in record time, not bothering to dump the tanks or properly stow everything. I just wanted to get out of there. As I was disconnecting the power hookup, I saw Patricia's truck pull into the campground. She parked and walked over to us. "Morning," she called out. "I came by to check on that situation you mentioned." "We're leaving," I said, probably more abruptly than necessary. Patricia looked at our half-packed RV, then at us. Did something else happen? Amy came out of the RV carrying an armful of stuff. "We heard it again last night, really close, right outside our RV. And I found this," I said, leading Patricia over to the cairn. I moved aside the top stones to show her the sock. Her expression changed when she saw it. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or concern. She stared at it for a long moment before speaking. "You should leave that there," she said quietly. "What is it? Whose sock is that?" Patricia looked at me and I saw something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. It was sadness, but also something else. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. "It's best if you folks move on," she said. "This park isn't for everyone." "What the hell does that mean?" She started walking back to her truck. "Safe travels." I wanted to press her, demand answers, but Amy grabbed my arm. "Let's just go." We finished packing in silence and pulled out of Capitol Reef by 9 in the morning. As we drove away, I looked back once and saw Patricia standing by the cairn, staring at it with her hands in her pockets. We drove to a different campground about 60 miles away near Escalante. Neither of us talked much during the drive. When we finally parked and set up for the night, Amy made us sandwiches and we ate them outside, grateful for the presence of other campers around us, families with kids, a group of college students, normal people doing normal things. "Are we going to talk about what happened?" Amy asked after we'd finished eating. I don't know what to say. That wasn't an animal, Jacob. Something was there. Something was on our roof. I know. So what was it? I didn't have an answer. We sat there as the sun went down, not talking, just existing in the comfortable noise of the busy campground. When it got dark, we went inside and locked the door out of habit, even though we were surrounded by other people. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I heard crying again. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. The same child's voice, the same desperate sobbing. I got up and went to the window. Outside, in the space between our RV and the one next to us, I saw her. She was small, maybe 4 years old, wearing a dirty white dress. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging in front of her face. She stood there in the shadows, her small shoulders shaking with sobs, her hands hanging limply at her sides. One of her feet was bare. The other wore a pale blue sock with faded pink flowers. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She just stood there, crying, never looking up, never moving except for those shuddering sobs. Then she started walking, not toward any particular RV, just walking in a slow circle around the campground, her bare foot leaving small prints in the dust. I watched her circle past our RV once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th pass, she stopped directly in front of our door. She raised her head for the first time, and I saw her face. It was wrong, not deformed or monstrous, just wrong in a way I can't properly explain, like a photograph that's been slightly corrupted, or a reflection in water that doesn't quite match what it's reflecting. Her features didn't line up properly, and her eyes were too dark, too empty. She reached out toward our door with one small hand. I stumbled backward, knocking into the dinette table. The sound woke Amy, who sat up in bed. "Jacob, what's wrong?" When I looked back at the window, the girl was gone. "Nothing," I said automatically. "Bad dream." But I know I wasn't asleep. I know what I saw. We left that campground the next morning without giving any explanation to the staff. We just got in the RV and drove. Amy suggested we head home, cut the trip short, but I couldn't face the long drive back to Chicago. Instead, we ended up at a cheap motel in a town whose name I can't remember now. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, things have gotten worse. Not in dramatic ways, but in small, creeping ways that are somehow more terrifying. Amy hears the crying sometimes when I don't. She'll suddenly stop whatever she's doing and tilt her head, listening, while I hear nothing. Other times, I'll hear it, and she won't. We've stopped mentioning it to each other. I found another sock last week. We were back home in Chicago by then, living in our apartment like normal people. I was taking out the trash, and there it was, sitting on top of the dumpster in our alley. Same pale blue color, same faded pink flowers. I didn't tell Amy. I just left it there and went back inside. The crying follows me now. Not every night, but often enough. Sometimes it's distant, like it's coming from several blocks away. Other times it's closer, right outside our apartment building. Once I heard it coming from our bathroom when I woke up in the middle of the night. I didn't check. I just lay there until morning. Amy has started having memory problems. She'll forget conversations we had, places we went. Last week she asked me when we took our trip to Utah, and when I said October, she got this confused look and said she didn't remember going anywhere in October. When I showed her photos on my phone, she stared at them like she'd never seen them before. My own memory is going too. Whole days will just vanish. I'll realize it's Thursday when I could swear it was Tuesday just hours ago. I've started finding notes that I apparently wrote to myself but have no memory of writing. They say things like, "Don't forget and stay inside when you hear it," and one sock left. The sock is the worst part. Last night I was doing laundry and found I was missing a sock from one of my pairs. Just one sock, leaving the other orphaned in the basket. I searched the whole apartment but couldn't find it. I know what happened to it. I know where it went. There are only a few things I'm certain of anymore. I know my name is Jacob Morgan. I know I went to Capitol Reef with my girlfriend Amy. I know we heard something there that shouldn't exist and that something followed us home. And I know that whatever it is, it's getting closer. I can hear it right now, actually. That crying, coming from somewhere in our apartment building. Amy is asleep next to me, but I'm wide awake, listening to those desperate sobs getting closer, closer, moving through the hallways, climbing the stairs. I should wake Amy. I should call someone, but I don't think it would matter anymore. I keep thinking about that cairn of stones at Capitol Reef and the sock underneath. How many other people have left something there? How many other people heard the crying and couldn't resist following it? The crying is right outside our door now. I can hear her on the other side, sobbing so hard she must be running out of breath, except she never seems to run out of breath. She just keeps crying and crying and crying. In a moment, I'm going to get up. I'm going to walk to that door, and I'm going to open it. I know I shouldn't. I know this is exactly what I shouldn't do, but I can't help it. The crying is so sad, so full of pain and need. She needs help. She needs someone to help her. I'm standing now. Amy is still asleep. I'm walking toward the door. My hand is on the lock. I'm turning it. The crying has stopped. I'm opening the door. I can see her standing there in the hallway, lit by the emergency exit sign. She's holding out her hand to me, her small fingers spread wide. Her face is still wrong, still corrupted, but she's looking right at me now with those dark, empty eyes. She's reaching for me. I'm reaching back. I want to stop writing. I want to close this document and back away from the computer. But I can't remember how I got here or when I started typing. I look down and realize I'm not wearing any socks. My feet are bare on the cold apartment floor. When I look up again, Amy is standing in the bedroom doorway staring at me. But something's wrong with her face. It doesn't quite line up properly anymore, like a photograph that's been corrupted. Her eyes are too dark. "Come back to bed," she says, but her voice sounds off like it's coming from somewhere else, somewhere far away. I look back at my computer screen and realize I've been writing the same sentence over and over again at the bottom of the document, hundreds of times in tiny text. I followed the crying. I followed the crying. I followed the crying. I followed the crying. I don't remember typing that. The crying starts again, but this time it's coming from inside the apartment. From the bedroom where Amy is standing. From multiple places at once. I look down at my hands on the keyboard and notice something. My fingernails are dirty, like I've been digging in soil. Red Utah soil, the color of Capitol Reef sandstone, and there's a pale blue sock in my lap with faded pink flowers on it. I don't remember how it got there. I don't remember what I did. The crying is all around me now, inside and outside, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Amy is still standing in the doorway, holding out her hand to me, her face wrong, her eyes empty. "Come back to bed," she says again. I'm so tired. I can't remember the last time I really slept. Maybe I should just go back to bed. Maybe if I close my eyes, everything will make sense again in the morning. I'm closing this document now. I'm standing up from the computer. I'm walking toward Amy's outstretched hand. She's smiling at me, but the smile doesn't reach her corrupted eyes. The crying surrounds us both as I take her hand, and I finally understand. We never left Capitol Reef at all. We've been walking in circles for weeks following that sound. while the thing that was pretending to be Amy led me deeper and deeper into something I can't escape from. The apartment isn't real. Chicago isn't real. Nothing has been real since that first night when I heard the crying and couldn't stop myself from listening. I'm still there, in Site 17, standing outside our RV in the middle of the night. I'm still walking toward the crying. I'm still following it into the darkness beyond the campground lights, and I'm never going to stop. Story 5. My name is Grace Walker. I'm writing this from a hospital bed in Cedar City, Utah, 3 days after we left Snow Canyon State Park. The doctors say I'm suffering from severe dehydration, exposure, and what they're calling a dissociative episode. They don't believe what I'm telling them. They think the isolation and heat got to me. Maybe they're right. Maybe I imagined all of it. But I still hear that piano sometimes, late at night when the hospital is quiet. I need to write this down while it's still fresh, while I can still separate what actually happened from what I think happened. We arrived at Snow Canyon on a Tuesday afternoon in early September. Me, my husband Derek, and our friends Mike and Sarah Chen. The four of us had been planning this trip for months, a week of camping in southern Utah before the real heat of summer gave way to fall. Derek had just bought a used RV, a 1998 Winnebago that he'd gotten for a steal at an auction, 26 feet of cramped quarters that smelled faintly of mildew and propane. But it was ours. The campground was about half empty when we pulled in. Sites 14 through 22 were a cluster of RV pads surrounded by red rock formations and juniper trees. We took Site 18, backing the Winnebago into the spot while Mike directed Derek with increasingly frustrated hand gestures. Sarah and I set up the folding chairs and the portable fire pit while they bickered. "You're going to hit that post," Mike called out. "I can see the post, Mike." "I'm just saying." "I got it." The sound of scraping metal made us all wince. Derek had clipped the utility hookup with the rear bumper. "You got it," Mike said flatly. Sarah caught my eye and we both tried not to laugh. The guys had been friends since college and their relationship was built on this kind of needling. Derek was methodical and careful, which made his rare mistakes the subject of endless ribbing. Mike was impulsive and loud, which meant he made mistakes constantly but never seemed bothered by them. We spent the afternoon hiking the Whiptail Trail, a relatively easy loop that took us through the volcanic landscape. The rock formations were stunning. Layers of Navajo sandstone stacked like a broken layer cake, painted in shades of cream and rust. Sarah, who taught geology at the community college back home, kept stopping to examine the striations and explain tectonic shifts that happened millions of years ago. "See how the layers are offset here?" she said, running her hand along a fractured section of rock. "That's from fault movement. This whole area is geologically young." "Young meaning what?" Derek asked. "Young meaning about 10,000 years since significant volcanic activity." Mike kicked at a chunk of black basalt. "So we're not going to get lava, Ed?" "Probably not this week." That first night was perfect. We grilled burgers on the fire pit and drank beer as the sun set, painting the canyon walls in impossible shades of orange and pink. Other campers were scattered throughout the sites. A family with 2 kids in Site 14, an older couple in a massive fifth wheel in Site 22, a solo guy in a tent at Site 19. Everyone kept to themselves in that polite camping way where you acknowledge each other's existence with a wave, but don't intrude. Around 10, we headed into the RV. Mike and Sarah took the fold-out couch in the main cabin while Derek and I climbed into the bedroom and back. The Winnebago's bedroom was barely larger than the mattress it contained, with thin walls that did nothing to muffle sound. We could hear Mike and Sarah talking in low voices, hear the creak of the couch springs, hear every car that drove past on the access road. "This thing has the insulation of a cardboard box," Derek muttered, pulling the thin comforter up to his chin. "It was cheap for a reason." "Yeah, but I thought it would at least be quiet." I was almost asleep when I heard it for the first time. Piano music. Just a few notes at first. A simple melody that seemed to come from somewhere outside. I lifted my head from the pillow, listening. The music continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Derek was already asleep, breathing heavily through his nose. I waited, but the music didn't come back. I checked my phone, 3:07 a.m. Probably someone in another campsite playing music from their phone, I decided. Annoying, but not worth getting worked up about. I fell back asleep. Wednesday, we drove into town for supplies and spent the afternoon at a swimming hole Sarah had found on some hiking blog. The water was freezing, snowmelt from higher elevations, but it felt good after the heat of the day. We were back at camp by 6, grilling chicken and playing cards on the picnic table while the temperature dropped. The family from Site 14 packed up and left around 7, their 2 kids arguing about who got to sit in the front seat. The solo guy in Site 19 was sitting outside his tent reading by headlamp. He was probably in his 50s, with a gray beard and the lean build of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. He'd nodded at us a few times but never tried to start a conversation. "He's been here since Monday," Sarah said, keeping her voice low. I asked the camp host. "So?" Mike dealt another hand. "So he's just sitting there, alone, reading the same book. Maybe he likes to read, for 3 days straight." Derek looked over at Site 19. "He's probably just one of those people who comes out here to get away from everything. Can't blame him." I thought about mentioning the piano music from the night before, but it seemed trivial, and I wasn't even sure I'd really heard it. The mind does strange things in that space between sleep and waking. We stayed up until midnight playing cards and telling stories about past camping trips. Mike told the one about the time he and Derek had accidentally set up their tent on an anthill in Big Sur. Derek countered with the story about Mike getting lost on a day hike in the Sierras and having to be rescued by park rangers. Sarah and I had heard both stories a dozen times, but they were funny enough that we didn't mind. Inside the RV, I brushed my teeth at the tiny sink while Derek checked that all the windows were latched. The night had turned cold, desert cold, the kind that seeps through walls and settles in your bones. "Think we'll see that guy in Site 19 tomorrow?" Derek asked. "Probably. Why?" "I don't know. Sarah's right that it's weird. 3 days alone reading the same book. Maybe he's just slow reader." Derek smiled. "Maybe." We climbed into bed. The mattress was thin and uncomfortable, the kind that had been adequate 15 years ago, but now was just a suggestion of support. I could feel every spring, could hear Mike and Sarah moving around on the fold-out couch, the squeak of hinges as someone opened the small fridge, the rustle of a sleeping bag. I was drifting off when I heard it again. Piano music. The same simple melody, maybe 6 or 7 notes repeating. It was louder this time, or clearer, closer. I grabbed my phone from the shelf above the bed and checked the time. 3:06 a.m. I sat up, listening hard. The music continued. Definitely a piano, definitely outside. It had a tinny quality, like it was coming from a phone speaker or a small radio. "Derek," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. He groaned. "What?" "Listen. Do you hear that?" He was quiet for a moment. The music stopped. "Hear what?" "The piano. Someone was playing piano music. I don't hear anything. It just stopped." He rolled over, pulling the comforter with him. "It's probably from one of the other sites. Go back to sleep." But I couldn't. I lay there in the dark, listening to the silence, waiting for the music to start again. It didn't. After maybe 20 minutes, I finally fell asleep. Thursday morning, I felt exhausted, like I'd been awake all night. Derek was already up, making coffee in the RV's tiny kitchen. I could smell it from the bedroom, that bitter, burnt smell of gas station coffee made with too little water. "Morning," he said when I emerged. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep great." "Because of the piano?" I'd almost forgotten about telling him. "Yeah, I don't know. Maybe." Mike and Sarah were already outside, sitting at the picnic table with their own coffee. The morning sun was just starting to hit the top of the canyon walls, turning them golden. "Sleep okay?" Sarah asked as I sat down. "Not really, I kept hearing music." She glanced at Mike. "What kind of music?" "Piano, like a melody or something. Really simple. It woke me up twice." "What time?" "Around 3, both nights." Mike sipped his coffee. Probably someone watching videos on their phone. Sound carries out here. It was a reasonable explanation. I wanted to believe it. But something about the music had felt wrong, not the music itself, but the timing, the precision of it. Both nights at 306, we spent the day hiking in the canyon, avoiding the heat by staying in the shade of the rock formations. The solo guy from Site 19 was on the trail ahead of us at one point. He was walking slowly, stopping every few minutes to look at something on the ground or touch the rock walls. "Hey," Derek called out to him. "How's it going?" The man turned and looked at us. Up close, his beard was streaked with white, and his face was deeply tanned. His eyes were blue, almost colorless in the bright sun. "Good," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in a while. "Beautiful out here," Derek continued, trying to be friendly. The man nodded slowly. He looked at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering on me for an extra second. Then he turned and continued walking. "Friendly," Mike said once the man was out of earshot. "Give him a break," Sarah said. "Some people come out here to be alone." "Then why go to a campground?" "Because you still need facilities." We didn't see the man again for the rest of the hike. When we got back to the campground, his tent was zipped up and his car was gone. The camp host, a retired couple from Nevada who lived in a massive motorhome at the entrance, were making their rounds, checking that everyone had paid. "You folks doing okay?" the wife asked. Her name was Barbara, and she had the kind of aggressively cheerful demeanor that suggested she'd dealt with a lot of difficult campers over the years. "Great," Derek said. "Beautiful spot." "Isn't it? We've been hosting here for 3 seasons now. Never gets old." "Hey," I said, "the guy in Site 19, have you talked to him much?" Barbara's smile faltered slightly. "Thomas? Not really. He's been coming here for years. Usually stays about a week at a time. Keeps to himself." "Years?" "Since before we started hosting. Maybe 5 or 6 years. He's harmless. Just likes his privacy." Something about the way she said it made me think there was more to the story, but I didn't push. We thanked her, and she moved on to the next site. That night we ate at a restaurant in town, a local place that specialized in Navajo tacos and green chili. We got back to the campground around 10, tired and full. Site 19 was still empty. Thomas's car hadn't returned. "Maybe he left," Sarah said. "His tent's still set up," Mike pointed out, "so he'll be back." Inside the RV, I took a sleep aid. Just a mild antihistamine, but enough to help me relax. I didn't want another night of broken sleep. Derek fell asleep almost immediately, and I could hear Mike and Sarah doing the same on the fold-out couch. The medication worked. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, until something pulled me awake. Piano music. I opened my eyes in the darkness. The music was playing, the same simple melody, 6 or 7 notes repeating. I grabbed my phone. 3:06 a.m. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and moved to the window. The campground was dark except for the security lights at the bathroom facilities. I couldn't see where the music was coming from. Then I noticed something. Thomas's car was back in Site 19, and his tent was glowing faintly from inside, like there was a light on. The music continued. It was definitely coming from that direction. I stood at the window watching, listening. The melody repeated maybe 6 times, then stopped abruptly. The light in Thomas's tent went out. I waited, but nothing else happened. After a few minutes, I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. Friday morning, I told everyone about the music. 3:06 again? Sarah asked. Exactly 3:06. That's weird. Derek poured coffee. But weird how? People have routines. Maybe this Thomas guy wakes up at 3 and listens to music. Maybe it helps him fall back asleep. Why the same song? I asked. I don't know. Why does anyone listen to the same thing over and over? It was a fair point, but it didn't explain the feeling I'd had watching that tent, the sense that something about the situation was wrong. Mike suggested we hike the lava flow trail, a more challenging route that would take most of the day. Sarah and Derek were enthusiastic, but I begged off. I told them I was tired, needed to catch up on sleep. The truth was I wanted to stay at the campground. I wanted to see what Thomas did during the day. They left around 8, taking plenty of water and promising to be back by 4. I sat outside with a book, pretending to read while watching Site 19. Thomas emerged from his tent around 9. He was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, khaki pants and a faded blue shirt. He didn't go anywhere, just sat in his camp chair and stared at the canyon walls. I tried to focus on my book, but I kept glancing over. He wasn't reading, wasn't on his phone, just sitting there. Around 11, I decided to approach him. I told myself I was being neighborly, but really I just wanted to ask about the music. "Hey," I called out as I walked over. "I'm Grace. I'm in Site 18. He looked at me with those pale blue eyes. "Thomas." "I know. The camp host mentioned you." He didn't say anything. "So, you come here a lot?" "Yes." "It's beautiful." "Yes." This was going nowhere. I took a breath. "I heard music last night, piano music, around 3 in the morning. Was that you?" His expression didn't change. "You shouldn't listen to it." "What?" "The music. When you hear it, don't listen. Go back to sleep." "I don't understand." He turned his gaze back to the canyon walls. "It only plays when you're alone." A chill ran through me despite the heat. "What does that mean?" "You'll understand tonight." He stood up and walked into his tent, zipping it closed behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling foolish and unsettled. Then I went back to Site 18. I spent the afternoon trying to read, trying not to think about what Thomas had said. It only plays when you're alone. What did that mean? And how did he know I'd heard it? Derek, Mike, and Sarah got back around 4:30, sunburned and exhausted. They'd seen a rattlesnake on the trail and Sarah had taken about 50 photos. Mike had twisted his ankle on some loose rocks but insisted he was fine. We ordered pizza from a place in town and had it delivered to the campground, eating it straight from the box while the sun set. Thomas's tent stayed zipped up all evening. His car didn't move. "Did you see the hermit today?" Mike asked. "Yeah, talked to him." And he's weird. But I don't think he's dangerous." "What did he say?" I hesitated. "Just that he likes his privacy." It wasn't exactly a lie, but I didn't want to tell them about the music comment. It sounded crazy and I wasn't sure what it meant. That night, Derek wanted to have sex. I was tired and my mind was elsewhere, but I went along with it. It was quick and mechanical, and afterward he fell asleep almost immediately. I lay next to him, listening to him breathe, listening to the sounds of Mike and Sarah settling in on the fold-out couch. I didn't take a sleep aid. I wanted to be alert when the music started. I checked my phone every few minutes, watching the time creep toward 3 a.m. 2:47, 2:53, 3:01. At 3:06 the music started, but this time it was different. It wasn't outside. It was inside the RV. I sat up, my heart hammering. The melody was playing from somewhere in the main cabin, tinny and distant but unmistakable. The same 6 or 7 notes repeating. I looked at Derek. He was asleep. I got out of bed and crept toward the bedroom door. The music was louder in the main cabin, but I still couldn't locate the source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Mike and Sarah were asleep on the fold-out couch, or at least they appeared to be. Sarah was facing the wall. Mike was on his back, mouth open. The music continued. I walked through the cabin, trying to find where it was coming from. It seemed to shift, always staying just ahead of me. I checked Mike's phone on the small table. The screen was dark. Checked Sarah's. Same thing. Then I remembered what Thomas had said. It only plays when you're alone. I looked back at the fold-out couch. Mike and Sarah hadn't moved. Derek was still asleep in the bedroom. Was I alone? I walked to the couch and shook Sarah's shoulder. "Sarah, wake up." She didn't respond. I shook harder. "Sarah." Nothing. She was breathing. I could see her back rising and falling, but she wouldn't wake up. I tried Mike next, shaking him hard enough that his head rolled to the side. Mike. Mike, wake up. He didn't stir. The piano music continued, louder now. Insistent. I ran to the bedroom and tried to wake Derek, pulling at his arm, shouting his name. He didn't respond. His breathing was deep and regular, his face slack. They were all asleep. Deeply asleep. Unnaturally asleep. And the music was getting louder. I grabbed my phone and tried to call 911, but there was no signal. I tried to open the RV door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle moved, the lock clicked, but the door stayed shut like it was welded in place. The windows were the same. They opened an inch, then stopped. I was trapped. The music shifted, and I finally understood where it was coming from. It wasn't coming from inside the RV. It was coming from outside, from the direction of Site 19, and it was calling to me. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. The melody was pulling at something inside me, creating a pressure in my chest that built with each repetition. I tried the door again. It still wouldn't open. The music got louder. I went to the window and looked out. Thomas's tent was glowing again, that faint light from inside. And standing next to the tent was a figure. Not Thomas. Someone else. A woman in a white dress, too far away to see clearly. She was facing the RV. The music was coming from her. As I watched, she raised one hand and beckoned. The pressure in my chest increased. I felt like I was suffocating, like the air in the RV had turned thick and unbreathable. I needed to get out, needed to get to her. I tried the door again, pulling with all my strength. It moved slightly, just an inch, and the music surged. I pulled harder, and the door opened another few inches. Then I heard it. Behind the piano melody, underneath it, there was another sound. Screaming, multiple voices screaming in harmony with the music. I let go of the door and it slammed shut. The music stopped. The RV was silent except for the breathing of my 3 companions and the ringing in my ears. I looked out the window. The figure was gone. Thomas's tent was dark. I checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. I stood there shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. Part of me wanted to wake Derek, to shake him until he opened his eyes and told me I was dreaming. But I knew I wasn't dreaming. And I knew somehow that I couldn't wake him, not until the sun came up. I went back to the bedroom and lay down next to Derek. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to him breathe, waiting for dawn. When Derek woke up around 6:30, I was still awake. He stretched and yawned, completely oblivious. "Morning," he said. "Sleep okay?" I didn't know what to say. How could I explain what had happened? How could I make him believe it? "Fine," I said. We got up and joined Mike and Sarah, who were making coffee and talking about the hike they'd done yesterday. Everything was normal. They didn't remember anything unusual from the night. I tried to act normal too, but I kept glancing at Site 19. Thomas's tent was open now, and he was sitting in his chair again. Watching. "I need to go into town," I said suddenly. "Need to get some things." "What things?" Derek asked. "Just personal stuff. I'll be back in an hour." I drove into Cedar City, my hands shaking on the wheel. I found a coffee shop with Wi-Fi and spent an hour searching for information about Snow Canyon, about the campground, about Thomas. I found nothing useful, no reports of strange occurrences, no legends or local folklore, just reviews praising the beauty of the area and complaining about the heat. I did find one thing, though, an obituary from 6 years ago for a woman named Rebecca Morales. She'd been camping at Snow Canyon with her family when she went missing during the night. Her body was found 3 days later at the bottom of a ravine. The cause of death was ruled accidental. She'd wandered from her campsite in the dark and fallen. The obituary didn't mention piano music, but it did mention that Rebecca was a piano teacher. When I got back to the campground, I found Sarah alone at the picnic table. Derek and Mike had gone to check out a visitor center. "Grace," she said when she saw me, "are you okay? You look terrible." I sat down next to her. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." I told her everything. The music, Thomas's warning, what happened last night in the RV. She listened without saying anything, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Grace," she said finally, "I think maybe you need to see a doctor. I mean that seriously. The heat out here, the altitude, I know how it sounds. Have you been drinking enough water? Sarah, I know what I heard. I know what I saw." Okay. Let's say I believe you. What do you want to do?" "I want to leave. Today. Right now." She nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Mike. We can probably head out tomorrow morning." "No. Today. Grace, we paid for the site through Sunday, and Mike's ankle. I'll pay you back for the camping fees. We need to leave." She looked at me like I was a stranger. "I'll talk to Mike," she said again. But when Derek and Mike got back, they weren't sympathetic. Derek was frustrated, said I was overreacting. Mike made jokes about ghost stories and too much sun. Even Sarah, who'd at least listened, seemed to side with them. "One more night," Derek said. "Then we'll go home tomorrow. I promise." "No, Grace. I'll drive home myself if I have to." "With what car? We came in the RV." He was right. I was trapped. Again. That afternoon I stayed inside the RV with the door locked. I could hear the others outside talking in low voices. They thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. Around 5, Derek came inside. He sat next to me on the fold-out couch and took my hand. "Grace," he said gently, "I'm worried about you. This isn't like you. I know what I heard. I believe that you heard something. But maybe there's an explanation that isn't, you know." "Supernatural?" "Yeah. Thomas knows something. Ask him." I did ask him. He said he doesn't play music at night. Said he's usually asleep by 9. He's lying. Why would he lie? I didn't have an answer for that. Derek squeezed my hand. "Look, how about this? Tonight, we'll all stay awake. At 3:06, we'll listen together. If we hear the music, we'll figure out where it's coming from. Deal?" It was better than nothing. Deal. But I knew it wouldn't work, because it only plays when you're alone. They tried. I'll give them that. At 3 a.m., all 4 of us were awake in the RV, sitting in the main cabin waiting. 3:06 came and went. No music. Derek looked at me with a mixture of relief and pity. "Grace." "Wait," I said. We waited until 3:15. Nothing. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Sarah said gently. Maybe whoever was playing it left. Mike yawned. "Can we go back to sleep now?" Derek touched my shoulder. "It's okay. We'll go home in the morning." They went back to bed. Within minutes, I could hear them sleeping. I lay in the bedroom next to Derek, staring at the ceiling. I waited. At 3:32, the music started. This time, I didn't try to wake anyone. I knew it wouldn't work. I got up and went to the window. The figure was there again, standing next to Thomas's tent, the woman in the white dress. She was closer now, maybe 20 feet from the RV. I could see her face, pale and beautiful and wrong. Her mouth was moving, but it was the piano melody that came out. She beckoned again. The door to the RV opened by itself. The pressure in my chest was unbearable. I needed to go to her, needed to understand what she wanted. The screaming was back, underneath the music, and I realized the screams weren't just coming from her. They were coming from the ground beneath her feet. I walked to the door. The night air was cold on my face. The woman smiled. Behind her, I could see others now, faint shapes in the darkness, standing in a loose circle around the campsite. They were all watching me. I took a step outside. "Don't." Thomas was there, blocking my path. He'd appeared from nowhere, standing between me and the woman. "Go back inside," he said. The pressure in my chest turned to pain. I tried to move around him, but he grabbed my arms. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "She's not real. None of them are real. But if you go to her, you will be. Let me go." "I can't. You'll die out there. I don't care." "Yes, you do. You just think you don't. She's in your head." The music was so loud now I could barely hear him. The woman was moving closer, gliding over the ground. Her mouth was open wide, wider than should be possible, and the music poured out like something living. Thomas shook me hard. "Focus. Tell me something real, something from before you came here." I don't... Anything. Your job, your family, anything." "I work at a library," I managed. "In Denver, I catalog books." "Good. What else?" "I have a sister, Jenny. She lives in Portland." The music wavered slightly. "Keep going," Thomas said. "I'm allergic to shellfish. I broke my arm when I was 12. My favorite color is green." The music was fading. The woman had stopped moving. The other shapes were retreating. "You're Grace Walker," Thomas said. "You're real. She's not. Say it." "I'm Grace Walker. I'm real." The woman screamed, not the melodic scream from before, but something raw and furious. Then she was gone. They were all gone. The campground was dark and silent. I collapsed. Thomas caught me and half carried me back into the RV. He laid me on the fold-out couch and covered me with a blanket. "You'll be okay now," he said. "It won't come back tonight." "What was that?" "I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for 6 years. 6 years since Rebecca Morales?" He looked surprised. "You found that?" "I saw the obituary. She was a piano teacher." Thomas nodded slowly. "She was my wife. We were camping here when it happened. She heard the music. I tried to stop her, but I wasn't fast enough. I'm sorry. I come back every year, stay for a week, try to understand it, try to find a way to stop it." "Can you?" "No. All I can do is watch. Make sure no one else goes out there when the music plays. Why doesn't anyone else hear it?" "I think they do, but only when they're alone in their own minds, when they're vulnerable. Rebecca had been depressed, having trouble sleeping. Maybe that's what drew it to her, drew it to you." He was right. I'd been anxious lately, stressed about work, about money, about a dozen small things that added up to a constant low-level worry. Maybe that had made me vulnerable. "What happens to the people who go out there?" I asked. Thomas was quiet for a long time. "They die, usually from exposure or falls. The authorities rule it accidental. But I've seen it happen 3 times now. They walk out into the dark, following the music, and they don't come back. Or they do come back days later, confused and broken." "Why do you keep coming back?" "Because Rebecca is still out there. I hear her sometimes, mixed in with the piano. I keep hoping I'll find a way to help her." I understood then. The woman in the white dress wasn't Rebecca, but Rebecca was one of the shapes in the darkness, one of the screaming voices beneath the melody. "You should leave," Thomas said. "First thing in the morning. Don't come back." He left, returning to his tent. I lay on the couch wrapped in the blanket and eventually fell asleep. Derek found me there in the morning. I was running a fever, delirious and dehydrated. They packed up the RV and drove straight to the hospital in Cedar City. The doctors say I have heat exhaustion and possibly a mild case of heat stroke. They're keeping me for observation. Derek, Mike, and Sarah believe this explains everything. The hallucinations, the paranoia, the conviction that I heard music. Maybe they're right. Maybe my brain was cooking in the Utah heat and invented the whole thing as some kind of stress response. But I don't think so. Because last night, alone in my hospital room, I heard it again. Just for a few seconds. That simple piano melody, 6 or 7 notes repeating. It was 3:06 a.m. And when I looked out the window of my 4th-floor room, I saw her. The woman in the white dress, standing in the parking lot, looking up at me. She smiled and beckoned. The doctors want to keep me another few days for psychiatric evaluation. Derek is supportive but worried. Mike and Sarah have gone back to Denver. Thomas hasn't answered the emails I sent him. I don't know what happens next, but I know one thing: the music doesn't care where you are. It only cares that you're alone. And at 3:06 a.m., everyone is alone. I'm writing this as a warning. If you ever hear piano music in the middle of the night, when you're camping or traveling, or even safe in your own home, don't listen. Don't try to find the source. Don't go to it. Tell yourself something real. Say your name. Remember who you are. Because she's always listening, always waiting. And the music only plays when you're alone. My name is Grace Walker. I'm real. I have to remember that.